Good evening. Welcome to the regular board meeting for the Oakland Unified School District Board of Education, Wednesday, April 24th, 2019. Mr. Rakeshaw, can we have a roll call, please?
On the first attendance roll call, Student Director Chavez, Student Director Amasoho, Director Hinton Hodge, Director Harris, Director Yee, Director Gonzalez, Director Torres, Vice President London,
Here.
President Ng.
Here.
Quorum present.
Thank you. The board will now recess into closed session. We will be discussing the items listed in the agenda. We will reconvene at 5:30. Thank you. The board is now in recess. Being to public session. Mr. Rakeshaw, can we have a second roll call, please?
On the second attendance roll call, Student Director Chavez, Student Director Amasoho, Director Hinton Hodge,
Present.
Director Harris, Director Yee, Director Gonzalez, Director Torres, Vice President London,
Here.
President Ng.
President Ng, are you here?
I'm here.
Quorum present.
There was no reportable actions in closed session today. Do we have any public comment on that?
There are no speakers.
All right. So before we begin, we're going to review our oath of office and meeting norms for the Board of Education. The oath of office is printed in the agenda. The meeting norms I will quickly review. We're going to honor the time, act as a collective body, check for understanding, surface assumptions. We will share divergent views and value this as a learning opportunity, celebrate successes in each other's contributions, presume positive intent, and no personal attacks. We have one item under special orders of the day. This is a report by the Measure G1 committee on the audit report for the year ending 2018. We have our chairperson here, Ms. Jill Habig, to be able to report directly to the board.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. I'm Jill Habig, as you know. I'm the chair of the G1 Commission. We were going to ask Nathan Edelman from BTD to just give you an overview of the audit report findings, and then I had a couple of other updates to share with the board, if that's all right.
Sounds great. Please go ahead.
All right. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Nathan Edelman. I am the independent external auditor. So one component of the packet in front of you is our audit report. I won't go over all the details of the audit because I've actually gone over that with the committee in much more detail. But on a high level, the point of the audit is kind of twofold. One, ensure that the accounting records are complete and accurate. And then number two, using those accounting records, select samples, ask questions, and really the point is to make sure that the compliance section, the use of funds, is in accordance with the ballot language. The conclusion from doing this is, I'm really happy to report, it's what we call an unmodified opinion. There are no compliance findings, and there are no financial findings to report. And so that is a really good thing. In fact, of all the various audits that I've been involved with the school district for the past few years, this is the first time where we have no findings, and that's a really good thing. There's a page in here where we actually laid out the specific procedures and the results of applying each procedure, and if there's questions, I can go into that in a little more detail. But that is the overall conclusion of the audit. So I want to kind of point out a couple of things that we ask questions and we produce the report, but the folks who are really responsible for ensuring that the accounting records are auditable, for supporting the audit and for asking questions, that is, a lot of that is Linda and Mark and staff within the district. And the other thing too, I've been to some of the COC, the Oversight Committee meetings for this parcel tax, and the Oversight Committee is really diligent about ensuring that the applications comply with the ballot language. They ask questions to make sure that everything is done correctly, and so they, I think, also do deserve credit for some of the positive results. So that's the overview of the audit. If there's any questions about the audit, I can, I'm happy to answer them or talk about something in more detail. Otherwise, I'll turn it back over.
Any questions specifically about the audit?
Okay.
Does not
Thank you.
appear so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So just a couple of quick updates I wanted to share with the board, and then happy to take questions. First of all, just on the audit and the overall process, I just really wanted to recognize Mark Triplett and Linda Pulido from our staff, district staff. Without them, the commission would not operate, and I think a main reason why our first audit was successful is that Linda and Mark and in particular Linda, really put in place a detailed reimbursement process to vet all receipts that we were getting to make sure they were compliant with G1. And so that was a tremendous amount of work, and just wanted to recognize them for that. A couple of challenges that the commission is continuing to have that I wanted to flag for the board and happy to talk about in more detail. We're about to roll out the teacher pay increase portion of G1. As you remember, we did not implement that last year, so this is the first year. That's going to be just an administrative challenge, particularly on the charter school side, because they will have to calculate the increase for their teachers, determine who's eligible to receive those pay increases and that sort of thing. And so we're starting that process. We're actually meeting tomorrow as a commission to finalize the instructions that we're sending out to school sites. And so that process, I think, is just like everything. The first time, there's some hiccups and bumps in the road. So we'll be going through that this year, and then the first audit will be later this year on that. We also had some challenges with the audit timing. In the first year, we had a lot of delays from some charter schools in getting the audit report into us in time. We've communicated with all of those schools about the timing for this year, so we're hoping that everyone will be on track for this coming year, but we're also amending our administrative regulations so that if people in the future, if schools don't comply with our timeline for the audit report, they may be at risk of not receiving the next year's funds, because we want to make sure that we're actually able to verify compliance before we continue to disperse money. And then the final challenge that we're having is there are some school sites that haven't applied yet for G1 funds. And so we had several school sites. If you look at page 10 of the audit report at the top, you can see the schools that don't have any 2017-18 expenses listed are schools that either didn't apply for funds or didn't spend them. And so we do want to really make sure that every school site is applying and getting the funds that they're entitled to use from G1. So that's something that we're working on. The final thing I'll share is just on success stories. One of the really great things about being on this commission is you get to hear from schools that are hiring music and drama teachers for the first time and are seeing their suspension rates drop because of counselors that they were able to hire and things like that. So we're still early in implementation, but we are really starting to see some of those success stories, so that's exciting to see.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the updates and the report. Questions from board members. Director Hinton-Hodge.
Is your name Linda? I was wondering if you could just come and be in the presence and be congratulated and appreciated and sitting there. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
I just because you're on camera now, so I just want to make sure we see you. So thanks for the work. I have a question. Just clarifying, is this the measure that has a stipulation around Oakland students? Like, is this the one where there's a calculation, like charter schools are actually only counting Oakland students, and then does that have an impact on the salary piece as well? Like, would it be some percentage of a salary based on the percentage of Oakland students you're serving?
So the only Oakland students are counted in the formula for how funds are allocated to schools.
Okay.
So that's how
Doesn't
that
impact
affects
this.
how the schools are funded. On the teacher side, teachers, in order to be eligible for the pay increase, have to teach at an Oakland-based school site at least 75% of the time. So that could affect some charter school teachers where the charter management organization may have campuses in multiple places.
Gotcha. Okay.
But because we want to make sure that the funds are directed to serving
But that
Oakland
stipulation
kids.
that it can't really apply there. Thank
Yep.
you.
Vice President London.
Thank you very much for the report, and I'm very interested to hear more about the success stories. I wanted to ask our staff if you could look into working with our communications team to start to put that data out. I don't know, and maybe the commission, you probably have thought of this already, but putting together even like a little fact sheet about here's some of the improvement we're seeing and putting it up on your webpage as well. I would love to be able to link to that in my communications with the public.
Thank you. Yes. Good evening, Mark Triplett, Middle School Network Superintendent. Yeah, thanks for that, Director. We actually are in the process. We've already built some social media outlets that do start to celebrate the amazing things that are happening, and we're in the works with the communication team to build that out even more.
I know we have a reporter from EdSource sitting right behind you. I hope she is, I can't see her from where I am, but I hope she'll follow up with you and ask lots of questions about how a very focused parcel tax can really make a big difference for our students.
And just one more thing is we with the communication team, we did just put out a video all about the amazing things happening in middle schools. I'm happy to send it to all of you as well, and if you haven't seen it. And part of that is G1, and it shows some of the fantastic stuff happening in all our schools.
You're going to say something, Superintendent Johnson-Trammell?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to thank the commission and to just personally thank Linda and Mark for all their hard work. This has been multiple years in the making, diligent planning, and a lot of cross-departmental meetings to get to some of the systems and processes that we want to improve across the system. So thank you for kind of being a place where we can learn and figure out how to scale in other places. I do want to take a minute to just shout out the just high-quality, wonderful video that goes to all incoming 6th grade families. A wonderful welcome letter welcoming families into the schools if you are a middle school parent, and a video to just learn about the investments where the money is going for G1. So just thank you for your work, not only around the G1, but just getting the word out to our families.
Director Harris.
Yeah, only praise, just thanking you for the work and for the commitment. I think you set really just a fine example for what it means to be a functional commission, and then team working with the staff here. It's just the community should know this commission, this group. This is the reason, part of the reason that the teachers got a bonus was because of Measure G1 and because of the fidelity with which you've handled the funds and the administration of those funds. And never did I imagine that middle schools would benefit in this way. And just on behalf of families, want to just thank you for all that you do. You're paid so much as commissioners for this work, but just thank you for all the work. And I'd never heard the superintendent so excited as when she saw the video, and the other families are saying, "Wait, all this is going on," and just is really a testament to what can happen when the citizens of Oakland really get a clear understanding of what the need is and what the possibility is. And it doesn't stop there. It stops with asking the tough questions as a commission, asking the tough questions and doing the legwork as staff and really forming a team to keep that going. So all the other commissions that do this work, pay attention. Real greatness here. Just thank you all so much for the work you do. And the auditor. I guess you got to thank the auditor.
Thank you. And if anyone would like to join us tomorrow afternoon, starting at 1 upstairs, we will be reviewing site plans for next year. So if you're curious, you can stop by.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the report and the update. I do believe we'll be hearing back from the commission probably later this year when you have recommendations. So this is a non-voting item. This time, do we have any modifications to the agenda?
Madam President, I'm sorry. We have a speaker on that item, Ben Tapscott.
That's not a voting. Okay.
The way the rule is intended is that we only have public comment if it's a voting item. Otherwise, we take all public comment on items, whatever this is, through A through N at the end of that period.
Thank you. Is there any modifications to the agenda? I have one. I am pulling item P9 on page 18. Which starts on page 18 and goes on to page 19 for discussion and further clarification by staff. Is there any other modifications to the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we will move on to the student director report.
Good evening, board members, superintendent, students, and families and community. On behalf of all City Council Student Union, we want to express gratitude for all those who stood alongside with us during these past few turbulent months as we advocate for equity in our school system. Students have been actively engaged throughout every stage of the budget process, from meetings with board members and presenting with them pledges to stand with students, to attending late board meetings, holding a press conference to announce our budget priorities, and surveying over 1,000 students. We can confidentially say that through these difficult times of feeling silenced and frustrated, a powerful youth movement and a cadre of new young leaders have emerged. We were successful in our efforts because of our organizing and your support. We have continuation of funding for many programs and services that are vital to our students from the city. Though these victories are temporary, they serve to remind us that the power belongs to the people. We would like to thank the students and their adult allies from Youth Together, Oakland for Kids First, Rio Hard, APAL, Oakland Pacific Islander Network, CFJ, BOP, and our OEA allies. It would not have been possible without the support of our community. This fight continues, and our students deserve long-term funding. Let's embrace this challenge to make us stronger and closer. Now, moving on to general updates and announcements, we are excited to announce our All City Council Student Union meeting for the middle school student leaders was a great success last Tuesday, April 16th, and Brewer student leaders hosted 35 middle school leaders from United for Success Academy, Westlake Alliance, and Melrose Leadership Academy. They continued to plan our annual Oakland Middle School Peer Resource and Ethnic Studies Conference. The conference will be taking place on April 26th at Mills College. That will be this Friday.
It's critical for the continued institutionalization of student voice in OUSD. In light of the previous term, there has been change to protocol for interested student director candidates. To run for this position, students will need 2 recommendations and show responses on an application, after which an interview will take place to learn about your passion for student voice in our district, and you will then present your speech at our regular election during the annual Youth Action Summit on May 17th. Please share this information with students who are interested in this position. If you're interested, please contact one of us for more information. I would also like to announce that Oakland High is holding the fun day for our community to decompress from everything that has taken place recently and to have fun with our peers and teachers. The Wildcat community is trying to raise some funds to make this day happen. It's May 12th. This day is entirely planned by the students on the Culture and Climate team in partnership with our support staff. If you're interested in donating, please contact me, and it would be greatly appreciated. Please contact me. Okay. For flyers, permission slips, or more information on any announcement above, please contact All City Council Student Union via our Facebook page or email Josue and I or me or our Meaningful Student Engagement staff, Aurora Lopez. Thank you. Oh, this concludes my report.
Thank you for the report. Is there any questions by board members or comments? Vice President London.
Thank you for your service and for your report, and I appreciate you naming how challenging these past few months have been. I'm really curious about your new application process to be student director. Are you comfortable sharing kind of what was behind changing that and kind of what you hope to gain from that?
So after the whole the process of budget reductions and everything that happened with the teachers, a lot of students have reached out to me and Josue, I'm sure, to run for this position. And we just want to make sure that students who are in this position have a clear lens are not being influenced by teachers or just making sure that the best students possible can be in this position, because we know it's difficult. So we try to make the selection process more challenging to make sure that we filter through students who actually care about it and who are not just in it to be to go off on board members or yeah.
I just want to observe that I do think that the All City Council, your profile has been heightened this year because of your action. I know that at Oakland Tech, which is the school I'm most familiar with, because it's the school I represent, more students are aware of All City Council. I was recently interviewed by students in the Race, Poverty, and Law pathway about the role of student voice, and so hopefully they're sharing that back to you all, because I think when they're done it'll be a really powerful video. So thank you.
And Director Omosoho, why don't you, in terms of the fundraising, what is the best way to contact you, just so folks who...
My email?
Or is there a link, or...
Yeah,
I
so
didn't
if
hear
you
where's the
email
phone.
me, if you're interested, I mean, I could send the email link to all the board members, but like community members who are interested, just, my email is yota.omosoho@ousd.org, and I can send you the link to the GoFundMe page.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you for the report. I just have a few quick updates for the President's report, which is item L. First of all, I want to acknowledge and thank our colleagues on the City Council. I was not able to make the meeting, but Director Gonzalez and Director Torres were there at the last City Council meeting last Tuesday, where they did pass a budget allocation to the district for $1.2 million to support restorative justice. Many of the student priorities, and students were there as well. There was a lot of behind-the-scenes work on with staff and many community groups and our colleagues on the City Council. So I just want to really appreciate and thank the City Council and our colleagues for the recognition that a community schools model takes all of us, and their participation and their role in that. And so that was an unusual act for them to take. It was unprecedented for them to take action prior to the close of their budgeting cycle, but they knew that there was urgency in terms of ensuring that there was clarity and confirmation prior for our budgeting process. So they took action early before their final budget adoption to be able to help the district in restoring some positions. So just want to really just acknowledge our colleagues, and then as well as many of the staff who put a lot of time in, particularly Curtis Siricki put a lot of time in, as well as the student leadership that really has helped to lift up some of the key priorities for students, and ensuring that these needs are met. I know that there was a lot of follow-up with individual City Council members as well. And in addition to the allocation by the full City Council, I was also at the Life Enrichment Committee meeting yesterday, because there's also a consideration of a 20% allocation of the sugar-sweetened beverage tax to go to the district, and so that is also moving along its process at the city level. So we're continuing to see partnership from various governmental agencies, and want to just acknowledge that. And then finally, last week I was up in Sacramento with several staff members as part of a kind of a case study with the Charter Task Force in Sacramento, doing a case study on Oakland, and wanted to just comment that that's just part of our ongoing work, and that that was an opportunity just to be able to talk about some of the impact that we've had here locally in Oakland. And so with that, that's my report for today. Just wanted to just highlight some of the areas that we are active in out in the community and in Sacramento. With that, we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Yes.
I have questions.
Director
So
Hodge.
in the task force, you all being the case study on Oakland, what were the fiscal, do you have a copy of that report, or whatever your talking points were? And can they be shared? And also, and then just what was the fiscal analysis that was done, and who was it done by, and when?
The report was emailed out already to board members. So you should have received that already.
From Attorney Epps, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I did see that. So I just wanted to, but I didn't hear much about the process. So like, when was the fiscal analysis done, and by who?
So I'll start, and then if superintendent wants to jump in as well, she can. What was presented was, and there was acknowledgement that we, as a district, have yet to provide an overall comprehensive fiscal analysis, but there was data that was pulled in certain areas, certain key areas where we could see specific fiscal impact, and the presentation was based on a lot of data and was comprehensive in the data. And so there was acknowledgement that there was not, that we have not had the capacity or the ability to do a robust fiscal analysis around the
So how
impact.
does that impact the case study for the task force? What were their comments on that?
The task force is not just about, it's about the fiscal impact, but also around authorization. And so, so there was conversations about both on the authorization side and also about some of the areas that we have been able to quantify.
So I guess my question is, if you were doing a case study, you have somewhat, fiscal information, but inconclusive fiscal information, what was the response of the task force? That's what I'm asking. I know that they're dealing with authorization issues as well, but fiscal is actually a big piece of the authorization conversation. So what was their kind of like feedback around that? Are they curious about, fiscal studies from districts? What did they say about that? Did they answer questions?
There was a few follow-up questions. In terms of the fiscal impact, it was more just clarification of what was included and not included in terms of impact around year-over-year ADA attrition. But there was not a robust discussion. It was a very limited amount of time, so there was not a robust discussion.
Okay. Thanks very much.
So we are moving on to the superintendent's report, which is on page 10. Superintendent Johnson-Trammell.
Thank you, President Ng. Good evening, everyone, community and board members, student directors. I am going to take a slightly different approach to my superintendent report. I have just a few brief updates, and then I'm actually going to turn my time over to our wonderful director of early childhood, Christy Anderson, who's going to provide just some brief good news about some of the wonderful work going on in our early childhood division. So I want to echo some of the shout outs that have been formally made just around deeply appreciating our city council leadership for their unorthodox and creative approach to budgeting, which allows us to move forward with some of the pieces that we want to do in planning for 1920. And again, as I've stated over the last few board meetings, just a deep appreciation for the collective leadership efforts that led to this, and hope that this becomes a pattern of how we work together in the future in service of our students and families. I also want to recognize 3 teachers that are the District Teachers of the Year. I had an opportunity to congratulate 2 in person this week, and 1 was on prep, so I respected their time to do their own planning. So just want to take the time to acknowledge Tantra Love, who is a TK teacher at Sequoia, Precious James, who is, I believe, a 4th grade teacher at Madison Park, and David Ramirez, who is a teacher at Urban Promise Academy. So there are so many wonderful teachers doing amazing things. Those 3 actually were recognized as our District Teachers of the Year, so just wanted to publicly appreciate them. The students were so cute. I'm saying cute because I'm thinking of the TK students. So it was just great being able to congratulate them in person. So at this time, I will ask the Director of Early Childhood to come up and just share some of the wonderful things in early childhood. And one of the reasons why I wanted Christy to come, one, a lot of times the work we do in the early childhood, we don't necessarily hear as much, but also a lot of the work that she's done is really focused around our 3 priorities: fiscal vitality, bringing quality to our preschool program and organizational resilience, really thinking about building the capacity. About 2 years ago, our early childhood program was in the red. We were running a deficit. Christy actually worked quite strategically with some of our partners at the time and really revamped the approach around the finances and also enrollment. So I think it's just a good story to tell that, you know, when we're focused and we really actually start to implement small things, big things can happen. So with that said, Christy.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Good evening, everybody. I just have 4 short slides to talk about 4 really wonderful things that are happening in early learning. The first is that all of our early childhood programs go through something called the Quality Counts Rating Improvement System. And for the 2018-19 school year, we had 5 of our sites go through this process. We were re-rated, and 7 of them received a 5-star rating, which is the highest rating you can receive. And our 21 sites remained at 4. We go through that cycle every 2 years, and we're seeing amazing results again this year. So the sites on the bottom are the ones that all received 5-star ratings, which just shows that the quality of our teachers, our instructional assistants, the quality of the classrooms, all of these amazing things that are happening, engaging with young children. Another really exciting piece is our enrollment has increased. The reason why early childhood has kind of been chasing its tail in a way is that when you don't meet your October 1st earnings, you're constantly trying to catch up with your contract. And so you can see on this slide, in 2015, we were only at 1,100 students. And that was a really hard year for us. And as you can see, we've slowly grown. So in October of this year, we were at 1,500. That's a major difference for enrollment for us. And we've done a lot of work to increase our enrollment, and it's been an amazing process. This next piece shows you our current enrollment and the trends that we've seen growing for the last 4 school years, which has been amazing. Right now we're at 1768, which is 99% enrolled in every slot, which has honestly not happened since 2008. So we're really proud of this. We've also worked really hard to reach the community, to work with Lotus Bloom and play groups to engage families once their children do turn 3, to show them that early childhood in Oakland Unified is an option. Another really amazing piece that's changed over the last 2 years is our budget. As you can see, in 2017, we only earned $9.7 million of our contract, and we're projecting to earn $13.1 million this next year coming up. So you can imagine how that provides higher quality. We're able to use our funding differently. We're needing less of a contribution from OUSD to balance. You do see CCTR, which is our school-age contract, go down. That's our school-age families. They're just choosing the school-age programs on their campuses, but we still serve about 200 school-age children. So this is a really exciting piece. Back in 2015, our contribution was almost $5.1 million. So to go from $5.1 million to $2.7 million for next year is a really exciting piece. You know, the whole goal is to be a sustainable program while increasing quality slots, right? We don't want to just go fast to then not make quality. And then one other really awesome thing to share is that with the support of Maria Suho, who's our kindergarten readiness manager, we have developed a transition tool. Last year we had a handful of classrooms participate, but this year we're scaling, so every single preschool teacher in OUSD will be completing a transition tool for their TK or kindergarten student who's moving on. This is directly linked to costs, so if we have any sort of concerns about that transition, we work with the school site before the child shows up. We also send these forms to the principal and the TK and K teachers so they can review them when they're building their class schedules. And it's a really amazing way to give kids an opportunity and families an opportunity to have the best start possible in TK and K. So we're really excited to scale that. And we're also linking with our Head Start partners they already do a transition form, but it never really gets in the hands of our TK and K teachers. So how we can link those two systems together, we're really looking forward to do that. So those are 4 small little highlights from our program.
Great.
Any questions?
Questions? Any questions to either the superintendent or to our early childhood education director? Director Harris.
What will it take for this program to become self-sufficient?
That's a good question. I mean, we are right now petitioning with the state to increase our contract. So OUSD in history has always given money back to the state, right? So our contract's 12.1 right now. We're asking for an increase of another $1 million for next year. So the more students we serve, the more self-sustaining we can become. But right now, we're having to see if there's other school districts or areas in the county that are under earning to basically kind of borrow some CSPP funds to continue to fill that. But obviously, we have the space to serve families, and we're opening 1 to 2 new classrooms every year based on need. And we're also getting a much higher reimbursement rate from the state, which has helped dramatically. So we're getting there.
Do you have a follow-up question, Director Harris?
Yeah. So if we served, how many students you project to serve next year? So there's 1730 this year.
Mm-hmm.
What's your projection for next year?
So we're increasing our slots by 62.
Every year, year over year?
We're trying to, last year we increased by 48 slots. Next year it'll be 62 slots.
Okay.
Yeah, and it really depends. So you earn a different amount depending on how long the child is with you. So we have some half-day seats, we have full-day seats, we have 10-hour slots. So it really depends. But you can't go too fast because you need to make sure your contract matches what you can earn. And if you over-earn, you don't get that money.
And you don't anticipate any decline in the amount of students we serve next year?
No, not at all, actually. We're showing a high need in Alameda County that families are still looking for preschool experience. And we survey families every year going into kindergarten what their preschool experience was. And we still have about 600 families that aren't accessing any sort of a preschool experience, which could be a family friend or neighbor, child care, whatever that might be. And we're really trying to work with those families to find out how we can offer them sort of play groups or whatever that might be.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Director Hodge.
Thank you so much for your work. I know you've been pretty diligent over the years, right, to build it to this level. I have a few questions and a little bit to the superintendent, because I'm wondering in our citywide planning process whether or not in this whole right-sizing opportunity and thinking about attracting in 600, students that parents are not necessarily choosing us. I'm wondering, is there a way to kind of think about where we might have space? I know that maybe you can't put 3 or 4-year-olds in school. I'm not really sure, but I'm just wondering whether or not there's been any kind of brainstorming, visioning or just innovation around using where we have empty seats and spaces in our schools, and whether or not there's a way to kind of look at using those spaces to generate. I know I've had the kind of delusion around a space in North Oakland to really look at having a state-of-the-art early childhood center.
Mm-hmm.
We visited one in Denver, as a
did.
matter of fact,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so just this idea of really being able to focus in on, I guess, I don't know if it was 3-year-olds, but definitely 4 and 5-year-olds and maybe even 6-year-olds, where there was a lot of attention to English language learners. There's a lot of attention to SPED students to deal with that. So anyway, I still hold on to that. And because we have space and we have buildings, I'm not quite sure why we might not explore that a little bit more. So just a thought. And then, so I wanted to know a little bit more about your L population and your SPED population in the early childhood space. And then kind of even thinking about, is that an additional expense that, potentially pushes us into that space where, we're having to, resource it from the general fund. So that's one piece. And 3-year-olds, I'm interested in that. And then the last question is a little bit more political. I guess there's legislation that we're actually going to be voting on today, or just approving and supporting. And there's some legislation that's out right now that's speaking to early childhood providers having to have a BA, whereas before one did not have to have a BA in order to be an early childhood provider. And so I know there's a conversation about quality preschool and who teaches, but I mean, maybe it's more of an opinion and a thought, and you don't necessarily have to share it, but I know that I'm very concerned about it myself personally. And so I even think, how might that impact your system? Because your folks don't have to have a BA degree, correct?
That's right.
Right, okay, so.
So there's
So
four big things there.
SPED, 3-year-olds, and the policies.
So I'm going to go backwards. So the bill that you're talking about is called AB 123. It's from McCarty, and I had the pleasure of going up to Sacramento about 3 Fridays ago as a part of a committee that was giving feedback on this bill. And you're right, a lot of people were concerned about that. Some pieces that came up was kind of this grandfathering effect that happened around TK when our teachers needed the 24 early childhood units. A similar conversation is happening for our more veteran teachers who may or may not have to get the BA. There's also a large amount of high quality educators that feel will be pushed out if they are having to get that BA. And then we also have a large amount of teachers that already have their BA, and some of them have their master's in early childhood. So the state's navigating that very carefully. So we, in our special education program, we have inclusion seats that we provide in 10 of our preschool programs. And the state changed where they can also be a part of our similar reimbursement schedule. So before we were taking on that cost, and now we can get a reimbursement for them. So another reason why you're seeing the increase. Our dual language learners are completely beautifully embedded into our programs. We have bilingual programs. We have teachers teaching in the children's primary language. A lot of the information that we get before 5 is parent report. And so we don't have a formal program, but we are serving families across multiple settings in Oakland and trying to make sure that we're honoring the child's primary language as much as possible.
How are you doing on the Arabic side?
Yeah, so we have a couple sites in West Oakland that we are working with our mental health consultants and working closely with the kind of parent groups and building up parents to be advocates. And we have a particular teacher at MLK who's doing an amazing job. And they have parent groups, and it's pretty amazing.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions from the board? Director Gonzalez? Let's try to keep to 3 minutes because this is just informational.
Thanks for the
you.
work. In particular, I'm really pleased to hear that all the slots, almost every single slot we have is being filled. I know that was a big lift, so I really appreciate it. I know it's good for our kids. It's also good for staff, because I'm sure that means we're hiring more teachers.
We are.
That's really great. My other question is, I know that we have opened up our early childhood slots for families who want to pay for our services.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious, I know the last time that you came and reported, there had been very little uptake. I'm just curious if that has changed at all, and if not, is there anything that you guys, any targeted strategies that you're trying to build interest in families who can afford childcare choosing us?
Yeah, so when we first started, we only had 10 families. This year we have 41, so it's slowly increasing. And I think it's just about really listening to families where the wait list is. We have to remember, too, that the money that we get is Title I funds, and that we have to match the free or reduced lunch rate at the elementary school that's closest with the number of tuition paid slots we can have. So if a school is at 80%, only 20% of the preschool slots can be tuition based. So there's not that many available at certain sites, and we're really trying to balance that out. But yeah, we're slowly getting there. San Francisco Unified has some magic push. I need to learn from them on how they're doing it.
Okay, and my other question is, I know we have empty sites,
Mm-hmm.
and I know we have sites that have room to grow. So you said that you all are trying to figure out, can we get a larger contract and serve more families? Is the thinking to open up more sites or to expand existing sites?
So we, with the exception of one classroom left at one center, we've expanded already as in all of our current CDCs. Last year I walked all of the sites with facilities, the ones that are closed or being used for something else, and there's definitely potential there, of course, but it has to be based on need. I think in the past we've made decisions to just open classrooms where there wasn't a wait list. So you really have to think about where families are asking for it, and then you open there. And so that's been that balance that we've been working on.
Great. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for the work.
Thank you. Vice President London.
Director Gonzalez has asked my 2 questions, so I will follow up with you separately about one thing that's specific to my district.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Does student directors have any questions? No? I just had 2 quick follow-up questions on enrollment increase. Of course, it is impressive to see the increase. Can you talk about some of your, I know you were creative in some of your outreach, targeted outreach for enrollment. Can you just highlight a few of those examples of efforts that you did to increase enrollment and outreach?
Sure. I mean, we put on our sneakers and walked around. That's really the truth. We talked to families around the lake. We went to libraries. We went to areas where families didn't even know there was a preschool in the community. We knocked on doors. We cut connections with Bananas and Lotus Bloom, like I said, and our family, friend, and neighbors. The play groups. It's quite an effort, and it happens in the summertime, so if anyone wants to join us, it's really beautiful outside. Yes, absolutely. And some families just don't know that Oakland Unified has a preschool program. And anytime I see a child that looks 2 to 3, I try to talk to the parent. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Maybe
Sounds like it's been successful, and it's recurs
every
year after year.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And then just a quick follow-up question to Director Harris's question about the contribution. I had thought that our contribution was around $1 million a couple years ago. I wonder if that's because are you counting Title I dollars in?
We
for the
only
OUSD?
receive Title I funding
Okay.
now, but you're right. There was a time when we were receiving general funds because the Title I monies wasn't enough. So you're right. That was the $1 million that filled that gap. But right now it's just Title I monies.
Great, and it sounds like even the Title I dollars have decreased then.
They have. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Director Yee.
Thank you. There's a couple things that I'm not sure that I exactly understand. So one is the school age program that we still have. And the school age program, I think, used to be because we had shorter class size days or something. But could you kind of explain how it works and why we have just 200 kids in that program?
Sure. So the CCTR school age program was the only school age program offered in Oakland Unified for a really long time, and actually was our largest contract. We had over 1,200 children attending school age. When the ACES grant came and individual agencies and schools took on their own school age programs or after school programs, we lost enrollment. It's slowly been decreasing over the last 10 years. So that's why.
So is it actually a viable program in terms of cost effective, or would we be better off switching these into ACES programs themselves? We're talking about the after school time, before and after school maybe.
So we definitely look at the need, and families are still requesting school age at some of our sites. So we have 10 sites that have school age. And where we augment the funds so we don't lose that contract with the state is we subcontract infant toddler slots with the City of Oakland and Unity Council. So CCTR money is used for school age children and infants and toddlers. And so we subcontract that money to the City of Oakland because we know that there's a real need for birth to 3.
So we're not actually running classes ourselves then?
We are not.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then the revenue we receive, this is cost neutral then?
It is.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for, I asked for them. Thank you so much for the report. Thank you to the superintendent. Is there anything else you'd like to add to complete your report?
Just thank you for your service, Christy.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So at this time, we have comments by bargaining units. If there's any leadership from any of our labor partners that are here, this would be the time that they can come to speak. Looks like we have Ms. Chaz Garcia here from OEA, Oakland Education Association.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Chaz Garcia, Second Vice President of OEA. And I'm just here to speak on behalf of all the educators and who are eagerly awaiting the approval of our contract. I know that your bargaining team was bargaining in good faith, and we're looking forward to moving past that and continuing the work that we need to do on behalf of our students. So I noticed that's late on the agenda. You probably won't see my face at that time, but yes. Also, I wanted to bring up the charter co-location issue. It kind of came to a head today at West Oakland Middle, just to raise that when we're opening up spaces, to keep in mind that these spaces, although they're not labeled classrooms, they're being used by students who need those spaces in order to do learning in a specialized way. So newcomers may be pulled out, and language groups and math groups may be pulled out by other educators outside of their core classroom. And losing those spaces means that we're giving those spaces away. And I taught at Stonehurst for 20 years, and in the beginning of my career, I taught in the hallway. So I understand what that means, and there were kindergartners, and I had no furniture. So I understand the impact on our students when they don't have a designated space. So I really would like to urge that we rethink how we're moving forward and how we label a classroom as in use, or a room or a space is in use and not in use, because it's having a negative impact on our students. And these are our most vulnerable students. So we need to make some changes there, because as I know, I heard that we have a new firm who's coming in to do what the Jacobs people did before, which those of us, myself, I was one of them on the blueprint committee, raised that the rooms were not being accounted for properly, but that was not taken into account. So unfortunately, we're having to spend more money to do the same sort of report. And I don't know who's exactly, I know some people sitting on there, but I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with how classrooms are used, because there was a misframing in the beginning and we kept drawing attention to it, but it just, the process kept moving along. So I would like you to please sit with that and figure out how that will be calibrated so they're accounted for. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Garcia. I also understand you had a recent award recognition, so just want to congratulate you for your recognition. Yes.
What item are we on?
We are on item N. We are next going to go to public comment on agenda items A through M. Are there any other bargaining units that are here and interested in speaking? Does not appear so. So we will move on to item O, public comment on agenda items, the above agenda items A through M.
We have 6 speakers: Miranda Smith, Adrienne Hogue, Tanya Kapner, Mark Airgood, Mike Hutchinson, Ben Tapscott.
Thank you, Ms. Floyd. And as folks are making their way up, I do want to announce again that we are trying to move towards an online submission of public comments and registration of speakers. So in the future, we just want to just continue to encourage folks to sign up to speak at meetings online. Go ahead.
Mark Airgood, Equal Opportunity Now, by any means necessary, Civil Rights Caucus. I'm secretary for the OEA. I'm speaking on the issue of co-location of charter schools and expansion of charter schools in opposition to the expansion of charter schools. A central issue of the strike, a central issue for parents, for students, for the entire Oakland community was the fight to stop the expansion of charter schools and stop the school closings across Oakland. It's no coincidence that the same areas, East Oakland, West Oakland, that are targeted for school closures are also the areas that overwhelmingly have charter schools being offered space on our public school campuses. We oppose that. I have a petition that's been signed over 900 times, a letter that's been signed by over 900 times online and in physical copies. I want to read just a little bit of this. This is from West Oakland Middle School, and says in part, if Envision Charter School comes into our building, it will bring a return of the problems we thought were behind us. I know this board knows the West Oakland had KIPP on the campus, and then KIPP was given Lafayette's building after it's fixed up. And then Lafayette was moved over to West Oakland, and now they're having space again offered to Envision. This is a complete attack on one of the few middle schools, public middle schools left in all, really the only one left in all of West Oakland. And we're opposed. We're afraid that if Envision comes on, we'll face Lafayette's fate of being fully displaced by a charter school.
Thank you.
We're opposing charter school co-location.
Hi, my name is Adrienne Hogue. I work with Equal Opportunity Now, by any means necessary, Eon BAM Caucus, and I am the resource teacher at East Oakland Pride Elementary School, where many of our classrooms are being offered to a charter school for the second year in a row, this time to the notorious American Indian charter school that has been known to put test scores above everything else, including cheating scandals, shaving kids' heads in front of the entire school, and other outrageous disciplinary practices that our school community and our parents and students are incredibly upset about. So we're here to let you know that we are no longer going to let charter schools and pro-privatization school boards get away with trying to push us out of our public school campuses, classroom by classroom. And we want to let these privately operated charters know that you can't take our resources from our public school students without our families and teachers and our students fighting back. Last year, we stopped the charter from accepting the offer because we called them directly and we said it was unfair and unjust that they tried to take our classrooms away from us. And a few days before the deadline, they came and they said, we agree with you. It is unfair. It is just. We won't accept this offer. And so we're expanding our movement. Many of the other schools are now collecting petition signatures. Many of the other schools are now sending those letters and those petitions to the charter school board operators at their places of business, at their law firms, at their whatever businesses they have, to say, you can't call yourself an educational philanthropist and steal resources from public schools and from public school students. We will not accept this. American Indian Charter School is not welcome at East Oakland Pride Elementary School.
Let's move on.
Hi, my name is Miracle Smith from East Oakland Pride Elementary, and I am a 5th grader. I came tonight to speak because I care about public schools. Public schools should be treated better and with more respect and more fairness. Last year we fought to not have charter schools come into our school, and we won. They can't take over our schools because we deserve to have our space. If they are looking for space, they should look for a space that no one else is using. They should not take over our space that other people are using. We deserve to have space to learn. I want the kids in public schools to have a good years while they're in school. If this is happening to you, you should fight for your school and the kids, because if you don't speak up, you might lose something that you can't go back to. Thank you. Have a good day. Go BAM.
Tanya Kapner, Equal Opportunity Now, by any means necessary, Teachers Caucus, and Oakland Education Association Executive Board member. I agree with Miracle. These are classrooms that are being used in public schools and should not be stolen from our students and had our students in the public schools crowded in to second-class parts of the schools that they occupy to bring in charters. This charter co-location, you all even admitted the study that you paid millions for and you now have to do over again didn't even properly show what classrooms are being used and not. These are classrooms in use for resource, for pullouts, for special needs students. These are classrooms that we could be implementing the part of our contract that says provide support for newcomer students and immigrant students with actual centers for them. These are places for doing art, for doing music. Our public schools deserve full resources, not the school closure plan and the charter privatization plan, which this co-location thing is really part of. And as was stated by the previous speakers, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of petitions have been signed around the schools in West Oakland and East Oakland because the parents and the students and the teachers know this is just separate, unequal. The charters do not serve students in the same way. They get to pick and choose, and we are committed to serving every student's right. In the flatland schools, in East Oakland, in West Oakland, in the Black and Latino community, in the Yemenis community in West Oakland. This is just not acceptable, and the schools are standing up and fighting and building the movement to stop the charter co-location. When we were on strike and we marched against school closures and said no more charters, we really meant it and we mean it, and we're going to continue to organize and build this fight. And so we're calling on this school board to stop lying and handing over charter schools our property that the public has paid for and that the public is determined to serve the students of Oakland with, because these are not empty rooms. No to charter co-locations, no more school closures of the public schools, no more charters in Oakland. I'm asking the community to sign the petitions and join with us, and no,
Thank
charter
you.
schools don't come take our facilities.
First, there is no such thing in the charter for co-location. It says affordable accommodations. If you want to co-locate, why don't you co-locate charter schools with charter schools? Why are we only seeing charter schools in black and brown neighborhoods? The discrimination is disgusting. Superintendent, you said last year, 168 students, you were going to move off of Lafayette's campus, and for once in about 14 years, we would have a feeder school. There are 678 students in West Oakland that are attending schools. If you look at Lowell, it has some of the older names where we were using some of those schools that were middle schools that became elementary schools. We now look at yesterday, Lafayette has 150 students. I was all excited about the superintendent keeping her word, giving us a feeder school in the MAC. West Oakland has 200 students. We have West Oakland children leaving West Oakland every morning, traveling long distances because this school board will not do the right thing. Walking around pedophiles, getting up early in the morning, it affects their health, it affects their sleeping, because this school board will not give them their feeder school that would then go into McClymonds. It's outrageous that you're doing this. And I was feeling pretty good. I got away from this place for a weekend, and I get a phone call. Coach, do you know Envision is trying to take Lafayette? I said, oh, that won't happen, because the superintendent made a promise last year that they would move those Lafayette students to either Prescott or Martin Luther King, and for the first time, children in West Oakland would have a middle school. And now you're backing off of that? Shame on you.
Thank you.
Mike Hutchinson. So if we're going to talk about shocked of some of the things happening in West Oakland, I was actually shocked to read through the agenda for the Facilities Committee meeting, which is going to be happening on Friday at 8 a.m., and to see that there was a link to a presentation called Central Office Housing Permanent and Interim Housing Recommendations, where it says there's a staff recommendation to rebuild the administration building at the Cole campus. I don't remember any engagement around that, especially over the last 2 years. The last vote this board took voted on rebuilding it across the street and giving Dewey High School an auditorium. So why is there an artist rendering and a staff recommendation for a plan that the community has no engagement around? Cole campus wasn't even brought up, ever. Not in the last 5 years, 6 years that that building has been flooded. And so I read on an agenda for a meeting in 2 days that this is the plan and the staff already has a recommendation, which means work has been going on. There's an artist rendering on what the building's going to look like. So how much have you already spent on this plan to rebuild at Cole without even consulting the community? Cole campus is not centrally located for a central administration building, and by doing that, you will again be denying that community access to an educational facility, because that's supposed to be a middle school. That's just the kind of school that West Oakland doesn't have. We also have serious questions about what's happening with the budget process for the 1920 budget. The OUSD is supposed to be engaging with the community in that budget process, a budget that needs to be voted on and approved in 2 months. It's been reported in the media that the county has now taken over financial services for the district. We have heard no word from our leadership about who's even in charge. Who do we even go to about the budget now? So you're going to rebuild our administration building, sell our property, do our budget with no engagement. This is why it won't work.
Thank you. So we are now on item P. This is the adoption of the general consent report. Director Gonzalez came a bit late, and she had a request to pull an additional item from the consent report.
Yeah,
I
thank you,
believe.
President Ng. I would like to pull P3. This is for Colin Jang Architects. It's a $576,000 contract I don't believe went out for competitive bidding, and I wanted the opportunity to vote no.
Okay. So is there a motion to adopt the general consent report minus item P3 and P9? Moved by Director Harrison, seconded by Director Yi. Was there any questions or comments on the general consent report?
President Ng, just to be clear, there was another item pulled before I arrived. Is that correct? Which is the
item P9.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment on the general consent report? All right, as Ms. Floyd makes her way up here, if you're here to speak on the general consent report, you can start making your way to the front. Ms. Floyd will read the names as she approaches.
We have one speaker, Madam President, Ben Tapscott.
I keep trying to figure out why we spend more money than we have, and why we're not putting it where it really is going to do some good. So many of these contracts, quote unquote, could be done by some of our teachers in this district. It doesn't make sense. I heard early childhood. We know there's a correlation between reading scores and incarceration. Your data shows us 19 low-performing elementary schools. While we point funds into that, we bring outside contractors in. They have these beautiful displays, and everybody says, ooh, ah, and I don't know if you check before we hire them in terms of their past performance. Our English teachers could do better than most of these people coming in that we pay for. And we don't have the money, or at least when we want to talk about a teacher's raise, we don't have the money. I hear we're trying to get out of 1000 Broadway. What are we doing after school for the 19 primarily black and brown students in this city at the elementary level that are not performing at a grade level or a decent grade level? Why aren't we doing something about KIP that's kicking out black students right now that are scoring low so they won't bring their test scores down? They're sticking them now over at Martin Luther King. Anybody doing that? Why don't we have charter schools in the hills? Why do they, if they're so great, why are they all below primarily 580 in black and brown neighborhoods? This is not fair to students here. 70-some% of ADA generated in this district that you spend are generated by 25% African American and 47% Latinos. Yeah, I know. My time is up. So is yours.
All right. Mr. Rakestraw, can we have a roll call, please?
On the roll call to adopt the general consent report minus items P9 and P3. Student Director Chavez.
Yes.
Student Director Amasoho. Not here? Okay. Director Hinton Hodge.
Yes.
Director Harris. Yes. Director Yee.
Yes.
Director Gonzalez.
Yes.
Director Torres is absent. Vice President London.
Yes.
President Ng.
Yes.
The motion is adopted.
Thank you. Is there, well, we'll go to P3 next.
Yeah, thank you, President Ng. I don't know, Mr. Smith, if you're able to.
We need a motion in a second.
Okay.
Is there a motion to adopt item P3?
So moved.
Moved by Vice President London, seconded by Director Harris.
All right.
Mr. Smith, I don't know, I know that, you know, for services, certain services, this is the Colin Jang architecture contract, that we are not required to go for competitive bids, but this is a substantial size contract, $576,000, and it doesn't appear to have gone out for competitive bidding. I just wondered if you could shed any light on why that was. Oh, okay, Mr. White, great.
Tim White.
Thank you, Ms. Smith, directors of the board. The item before you is a Colin Jang re-up of a contract that was previously for program management services. We actually have individual project managers hired and don't have a full range of program management services, so his contract specifically is for that. We're aware that it was not competitively bid this year, but it piggybacks on the process for competitive bidding that was done here when we selected Cordoba and Cummings, and I believe that was in 2016.
Okay, so this particular firm won a competitive bidding process 3 years ago. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. And when are you planning to go out for RFPs again?
Well, we like to do, we've actually done some in the past in terms of renegotiating the existing contracts we had, but I like to go out after the bond measure exhausts itself. We're currently now discussing the final draw for Measure J. And as we wrap up this, the conclusion of the projects under Measure J and anticipate a new bond, we like to go on the street and recompete at that time.
Okay, so the next time this firm comes back, are you saying that you anticipate that there will have been a competitive bidding process?
Yes.
Okay.
So any other questions for Mr. White on this contract? Is there any public comment on this item? Mr. Rakestraw, can we have a roll call, please, for item P3?
On the roll call for the adoption of item P3, Director Amasoho, Student Director.
Yes.
Okay. Student Director Chavez.
Yes.
Director Harris. Yes. Director Yee.
Yes.
Director Hinton Hodge.
Yes.
Director Gonzalez.
Abstain.
Okay. Vice President London.
Yes.
President Ng.
Yes.
The motion's adopted.
Thank you. We're on item P9. I pulled it for further clarification. These are for creation and revisions of job descriptions. There was 2 positions that I had questions about. The first was the revision of the job description of the Local Control Accountability Plan Coordinator. Given that there was a lot of interest
Madam
surrounding, yes.
We need a motion and a second.
Okay, is there a motion to adopt item P9?
So moved.
Moved by Director Hinton-Hodge. Is there a second? Seconded by Director Yee. Thank you. Given that during the budget reduction process, there was a lot of discussion, particularly from the Parent-Student Advisory Committee, around support for their committee, and I understand that in this last week there was a resolution and a lot of discussion around the supports. I thought it would be important to pull the item to be able to better understand how this aligns with what the Parent-Student Advisory Committee has been requesting. We did receive an email that it sounds like some members from the PSAC only were notified or knew about this position a couple hours ago, so they didn't have an opportunity. Some of them didn't have an opportunity to come here to weigh in, so I thought it would be a good opportunity to be able to clarify and for us to be able to have a better understanding of this position and how it differs from current position. And then the second position was the Director for Strategic Resource Planning. I'm not sure if that's related to this position also, but wanting to better understand this is a creation of a new position, and I know that later on today we'll have a update on the central office reorganization. So just wanting to better understand this creation of this new position while we're in the process of having the engagements for the central office reorganization. So how this new position fits in and how we know that it is aligned with what the needs will be. So it would be great to have more information. It looks like we have, I'm not sure if that's our Chief Academic Officer or Deputy Chief of Continuous Improvement, Ms. Sandra Aguilera here, and Ms. Tara Gard, who is our Deputy Chief of Talent, to be able to respond to questions.
Good evening, board directors, student directors. Okay, so happy to answer your questions. Again, my name is Sandra Aguilera. So this is an effort to combine the LCAP office and state and federal into an office that's called Strategic Resource Planning. So it includes state, federal, and local funds within that office. And it is meant to be both the programmatic guidance to school sites and compliance. And largely our state and federal has mostly worked in the compliance realm and relied on the content people to provide the program knowledge in terms of guidance. This director position replaces the state and federal director, who right now it's an executive director position. And the LCAP position, which is the coordinator, this is not a rewrite of the position. The first part that is stating who the person reports to is what was updated. So this person will report to the Director of Strategic Resource Planning. It does not change the job description details. The only change was the reporting structure. So it is an effort to combine two separate offices that have been doing similar work. The focus would be on school site planning, which is the SPSAs that the board reviews. The focus would also be making sure that we're spending our state and federal funds in a strategic way and making sure that we're not having so much carryover each year, that the funds are actually being used within the time frame so students are benefiting from those investments.
And how does the LCAP position align with the PSAC recommendations?
The LCAP position is a continuing position. It's not a change. It's the same position. I think that the confusion may be that the PSAC position, which is the LCAP engagement position, is the question that's being put forth for discussion from the PSAC. But these two positions don't involve that particular position. It's not changing anyone's job description to do that work, if that's more of the question.
Okay, so if I'm hearing correctly, so it sounds like the LCAP coordinator is just a technical, it's who it's reporting to is the main change here. It's not a new position.
Right, it was the first sentence. The coordinator is responsible for planning and directing the LCAP for OUSD with supervision provided by the Director of Strategic Resource Planning. In later or earlier version, of this position. It was to a previous position that we don't even have in our district any longer.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Director Yee.
Thank you. Is the Director of Strategic Resource Planning categorically funded or funded by LCAP or GP?
It is a mixture of funding, so we do have the ability to use indirect costs to fund this position. Largely, Title I has been funding the position, and that funding source will continue. So they'll have to do aspects of Title I compliance and program management. But it is trying to bring those two worlds together instead of having two separate silos.
Right. So this is an effort to have a more comprehensive annual planning around this whole school budget, including the categorical funds, the Title I and so forth.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks very much, Ms. Aguilar, for the clarification. Is there any public comment on this item?
I submitted online.
Go ahead, Ms. Honko. You can just introduce yourself.
Hi, Angelica Honko with Public Advocates. I had raised this item mostly because first just my antenna went up around the LCAP position, and because there has been so much discussion and desire on the part of Parent-Student Advisory Committee members to understand what the engagement support would be to continue to develop their leadership to be part of the district decision-making. At first, when I saw the coordinator position, I was wondering, was that the engagement position? It sounds like there's more the rewrite. So, and I'm not sure, I don't have the prior position before, but I do think that this coordinator position is important, and I also think it's important to really note that it does link the LCAP and the site planning together, and really that is something that we've been lifting up, is also how do we make sure the LCAP is actually not just capturing central strategies, but what is actually happening in school plans, in school communities, and what is working. But it does still leave the open question about, on the part of, there is a piece here about acting as a thought partner to family and student engagement and strategizing about discussions for stakeholders, and I think that's still the big kind of open question for, I know a lot of the Parent-Student Advisory Committee members are feeling really concerned about any changes that might undermine, what they've been building and the leadership that they've been building. And then I guess I did have questions. It was helpful to hear a little bit more about the thinking of this director, strategic resource planning, and that it's bringing together state and federal. I think that sounds like it makes a lot of sense. It's just hard to know, is this something to support when there's still going to be a presentation about how engagement is still happening about the central office reorganization, and not knowing what the whole org chart looks like until June. It's hard, I guess, as a member of the public to see kind of the bigger picture and how does this position fit in with the rest of it when you're just seeing the creation of a new position. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Rakeshaw, we're ready for a roll call, please.
Okay, on the motion to adopt P9, Student Director Chavez.
Yes.
Student Director Amasoho.
Yes.
Director Gonzalez, not here. Okay. Director Yee.
Yes.
Director Harris. Yes. Director Hinton Hodge.
Yes.
Okay. Vice President London.
Yes.
President Ng.
Yes.
Motion's adopted.
Thank you. We are moving on to unfinished business. We will have a 7:30 time certain of public comment on non-agenda items. We are on S1. This is the declaration of ongoing emergency, establishing and authorizing a budget for the restoration or repair at Community Day School. Is there a motion to adopt item S1? Moved by Director Harris, seconded by Vice President London. Is there any questions on this item? This will continue to be on our agendas so long as it's continuing to be an emergency.
We need 6 votes on this item, Madam President, for it to be adopted.
Okay, we will actually have to hold on this item then and move on to the next item, if that's okay.
Well, you should table the item.
Can we table it to later in the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, let's table this item to later in the meeting, if that's okay by the, is it the maker of the motion? Do we have to take a vote on that?
Well, it's the board's will.
Okay. Let's,
Madam President, I would ask that we table this motion until we have 6 members on the dais.
thank you. And now we're on item S2. This is a motion to adopt additional positions on specific bills pending in the California legislators. So motion to adopt item S2.
So moved.
Moved by Vice President London. Is there a second? I will second this motion. And with that, I will turn this over to Director London to introduce this item. There was both an update on some of the items we've already taken positions on included in this report, as well as new items for the board's consideration for positions. Vice President London.
Thank you. So, colleagues, you will recall that some point recently, I don't remember the exact meeting date, we adopted our positions on a number of bills. With this item, we are adding in some new bills. You know, as the legislative session moves forward, bills get amended, you know, fixed up. So school services is always tracking these for us, and they've brought forward some additional bills that they believe are in accordance with our adopted legislative platform. They deal with early childhood, employee matters, facilities, health and safety, the budget, student services, and charter schools. They've also given us a status report on the bills that we have already adopted. So we're not asking for any change there. They're just letting us know what's happening with those bills as they move forward. And you'll notice also that on some of these recommendations from school services, their recommendation is watch. It's not necessarily that we need to take action, but we probably want to be monitoring it because it's something that is potentially relevant to us. So with that, I would like to bring this forward for your consideration.
Are there any questions for Director London? Director Harris.
Can you identify which ones are new?
So if you look at the report, there's a report that starts on page 1 and it goes through page 5, and that's at the beginning of the stuff, the material, excuse me, that's appended or that's included with the agenda. And then there's a second report that is just the, it would have been helpful if they would have been posted as 2 separate documents, but the second part of this is similar, but it's a different package of bills because it's the bills where we've already adopted a position. So that again starts on page 1 and it goes through page 6 or 7.
So
yeah,
they are separated
it
out.
goes through page.
It's in
Actually,
one
that one
file.
goes through page 9. It's a longer one. So we're not asking for any action on the second set. It's only on the first set that we're taking action right now.
Director Yee.
Thank you. Under the employees, AB 221, Garcia and Christina, you know, that's the one that references Teach for America. And they took the Teach for America piece out,
right?
Which I think is probably wise. But now the language identifies the 3 areas which prohibits contracts, and it occurs to me that that we should probably do some due diligence in terms of what the impact on our own teacher recruitment
and
is.
This is one where the recommendation is watch.
Right, but so watching means we're better informed.
Right. So I did. I believe I asked the superintendent to forward this information to our staff and make sure that they're able to weigh in with us. But
right. So maybe we could get an update, just as so we're informed ourselves about if this were to be adopted statewide. Are there any impact? Is there any impact on our ongoing teacher recruitment for the upcoming year?
So that's direction that we'd like to provide to the superintendent.
Right. Well, I would like the superintendent just to give us a rough estimate of. It seems to me these 3 categories refer to 75% of our schools.
Mills, and our partners.
Yeah.
Right, and all of our partners. So I think that the impact of this kind of legislation
It's AB 221.
our legislative lobbyists should be informed about it.
So
Yeah.
what I'd like to suggest, Director Yi, instead of, putting our superintendent on the spot right now.
No, I'm not
is
saying to
that
do it now. I'm just
we
saying
do
that
have a teacher update. We have an update that that's going to be presented, I believe, at our next board meeting around
Right.
our teacher recruitment and retention
That's
efforts.
exactly what I was
So
referring to.
perhaps they can include a couple of slides that speak to the potential impact of this item.
Right, because it's
legislative item.
helpful for us to get an idea of what kind of partners we actually require in order to staff our Title I schools.
Yes.
Thank you.
Director Hinhaj.
Oh, great, thank you. So I wanted to just lift up again, AB 123, and I don't have that chart in front of me, so I'm not sure if we're watching it or not, but this is the one regarding requiring early childhood workers to have a BA, and so knowing that that could have a significant impact in our community, in our schools. So I don't know that I wouldn't be supporting that. And then just to watch again more for the Weber bill is in this, and then also the LCFF shifting the funding around there around low performing, and in particular there's, I think it's that one, which no it's AB 1225 Carrillo. This is an opportunity to fund the LCF dollars to go to homeless students as well as foster care students, and allowing that you can get basically double. You can get it if you're a student that's homeless, and if you are a foster student, you can also receive the money, as opposed to having to maybe choose from one category. So really supporting that in terms of like a real opportunity for equity. And then as always, like SB 756, that's around the charter piece, and then AB 1505 around charter authorization. All of these things, even at the legislative level, I've not seen good, because they imply some budgetary impact. I'm still kind of waiting on, some real clarity of that being brought up. So I won't be supporting because of those kind of egregious bills that I believe are detrimental for families, in particular Black and brown families. I won't be voting on the platform.
Okay. Is there any other questions? These are, just to clarify, these are, we're voting on the new set of legislative bills. There was an update that was included, but we will not be voting on that item. That's just an update for the board. Are there any public comments on this item? We're on item S2.
Actually, President Ng, I do have a comment. I just want to, I want to acknowledge that there's been a lot of work from our community, our teachers, as well as parent organizations and other community organizations, to bring some of these bills, to get some of these bills moving through the legislature that are going to hopefully, if they're adopted, address the fiscal impact and just sort of the kind of, I would characterize as general lawlessness in some parts of the charter world. So I'm really I'm just grateful that there's been so much leadership from different sectors of our community to get some of these bills moving, and I'm really hopeful that that's going to help us stabilize our district.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez. Is there any public comment on this item, S2?
We have one, Mike Hutchinson.
Mike Hutchinson with Oakland Public Education Network. We appreciate that our school board is now taking a more active role in advocacy, and for the first time in recent memory, the school board's advocacy work is actually aligned with what we're doing in the community and some of the same bills that we've been pushing, which is shocking. Hopefully, this isn't just a policy initiative for the state of California. Hopefully, that means you're going to try to enforce some of these policies here locally and really work with the community in ending the appeal process, creating conditions where we as a community have say over who we're paying to educate our kids in Oakland, especially in a city that has the highest rate of charter schools in the state of California. And we know we reached that number of charter schools under the state administrator when we didn't even have local control. This is really important and it's long overdue. Hopefully this also means we can start to look at, as we're delving into facilities issues, we can start to look at a school like Urban Montessori Charter School, which is placed at Sherman Elementary. Elizabeth Sherman Elementary, the first black female administrator in OUSD. That public elementary school was closed by the state administrator against or despite huge community opposition at a time when the school board had no authority to stop it. Now a charter school's been placed there, and the charter school's been there now for over 10 years. I hear the stories out of that school all the time of how the families feel mistreated there. But why do we have a school where it was closed, not by us, by an outside authority, then a charter school was put there in a place, and we as a local community have never even revisited those decisions? We have a long way to go. Hopefully this is just the first step in us really being able to control our school system, the system that we pay for. And lastly, hopefully at some point we can get a letter from the school board to counter what Libby Schaff and David Silver sent on how they feel about Assembly Bill 221 with Teach for America, because it's improper for them to submit how they feel policy-wise and ignore the wishes of our democratically elected school board.
Thank you. Mr. Rakeshaw, we're ready for a roll call.
On the motion to adopt S2, which is the district's position on these new legislative bills as specified, Student Director Amasoho,
Yes.
Student Director Chavez,
Yes.
okay, Director Gonzalez,
Yes.
Director Yee,
Yes.
Director Harris, Director Hinton Hodge,
No.
Vice President London,
Yes.
President Ng.
Yes.
Motion's adopted.
Thank you. We're going to go back to item S1. This is the emergency abatement, restoration, and repair work at Community Day School. We
Move
have
adoption.
6 board members.
Second.
Well,
Moved by.
It's off the table. You're taking it off the table, and it already
Understood.
has
Okay.
a pending
Oh.
motion and second, which
Okay.
was Harris and London.
Got it. Thank you. At this time, is there any public comment on this item?
There are none.
Okay. Mr. Rakestraw, can we have a roll call on item S1?
Yes. Student Director Chavez,
Yes.
Student Director Amasoho,
Yes.
You're going to get.
Director Hinton Hodge,
Yes.
Director Harris, Director Yee,
Yes.
Director Gonzalez,
Yes.
Vice President London,
Yes.
President Ng.
Yes.
Motion's adopted.
Thank you. We are, at this point, going to go to public comment on non-agenda items. Are there any public comment on non-agenda items?
We have 3, Madam President: Mike Hutchinson, Grace Borja, Ben Tapscott.
Mike Hutchinson. There's a couple of big actions coming up in the month of May that hopefully maybe we can have some of our elected officials actually join us in the community. I know there'll be lots of students there, and hopefully we can officially get the All-City Council to endorse some of these events and have some of the official endorsement. And just so you two know, I'm pushing in a lot of these meetings. People say, oh, we need to have students here, we need to have a student voice. And I always remind them, we already have an established student leadership. We need to go through them first and get them more involved. So on May 8th, New Schools Venture Fund, which is a billionaire slush fund that pioneered venture philanthropy. It's actually one of the biggest funders of Go Public Schools, and one of the organizations that helped fund a lot of our school board members' campaigns, are having their national conference in Oakland May 8th and 9th. There's going to be an action May 8th from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. to make them know that they're not welcome here in Oakland. Not them nor their 1,300 invited guests. This is one of the groups that's used their billionaire slush fund to splash around the country to influence policy. They've also been the seed money of groups like Amplify or Revolution Foods that then our school board has contracted with. So this is one of the worst of these billionaire slush funds, and they funnel money from across the country, and they're based here in Oakland. And so we're going to let them know that they are not welcome in Oakland. Hopefully we'll see some of you out there with us, but I know it might offend some of your funders, so I understand. We're also going to be having an event on May 17th. We're going to be having a town hall in the evening to go over where we are with school closures and inform the community on what's happened and where we stand right now. Because there's a lot of confusion out there, especially since the school board and superintendent will not give us any information about our finances and have continued to hold meetings like that secret ad hoc committee meeting by invitation only on a Saturday. And when I looked at the names of the people involved with that group, it's obvious you want to sell our property and what you want to do, but we're not going to let you. So hopefully the community will be with us in those things. And also May 22nd, there's a statewide rally at the state capitol. It's going to be in conjunction with the National Day of Action with the Journey for Justice National Alliance. And we're going to be turning up the pressure because no more business as usual, because you've shown us where that gets us.
Superintendent, you made a promise to the parents last year. You said you couldn't do it this year. So we need that promise kept this year within vision. The fact that we have all these kids traveling in the mornings because this board won't do the right thing, we expect you to do the right thing. If you're not going to lead, you need to leave. The fact that we have this now is disgusting. That these kids don't have anyone really looking out after them. This is not, you know, we've been fighting for a level playing field and now we don't even have the field. That doesn't make sense to me. You know, all this scandal about all the billionaires and the millionaires cheating to get their kids in your colleges and universities.
Excuse me, it's difficult to hear in the back. If you can please keep your voices down. Go ahead, Mr. Tucker.
And we knew that was going on. It's been going on for a long time. We know what's going on here. I told James, your charter school experiment did not work. It's not working. It's draining the districts of money, and those kids are not performing any better. We never hear about Prescott outperforming academically. Kip, we haven't heard that one. So the charter school thing is not for black children. The charter school thing is set up for white students and the privileged few. And they allow certain people into the club that do not look like us. And we know that charter schools are not for black students. Oh, they'll parade 3 or 4 of them up here talking about, please give us a charter. And then most of them, look at what you did to Marshall. Used to be 30, 30, and 30. Now it's 15 up by me and 45, James. White.
Good evening. My name is Grace Borgia, and I'm a Finance and Operations Coordinator at A-Method Public Schools. I'm here representing Oakland Charter Academy, and I'm here to submit just a minor material revision to our charter petition. This was submitted actually at the board meeting on April 10th, but we inadvertently left out the cover letter when we submitted it, so I'm submitting it again. And this revision, just to review, is involves providing preference to neighborhood families in Fruitvale and East Oakland communities that are in the attendance area of Oakland Charter Academy.
Thank you. We will schedule that for a public hearing in the coming month. All right, we are on to new business. We have 3 items under new business. The first item is approval of our collective bargaining agreement with the district and the Oakland Education Association. Is there a motion to approve item T1?
Move adoption.
Moved by Director Gonzalez, seconded by Vice President London. Is there okay. We do not have a presentation on this. Let's do public comment first. All right. As we're waiting for Ms. Floyd to come back up, I will just say that the board did receive letters from both Superintendent Monroe and also our county administrator, state trustee Chris Learned, about the agreement, and they're weighing in terms of the district's ability to afford the current agreement.
We have two speakers, Angelica Honko, Mike Hutchinson.
Hi, Angelica Honko with Public Advocates. I think my main comment is just to the correspondence that's happening with the county, and I know from day-to-day information is coming out, but given the desire for full transparency and for folks to really be able to understand and weigh in on the budget decisions, and also for there to be no surprises if there should be a need for further budget reductions or maybe opportunities to reinvest back into certain programs. To be able to do that, I would really encourage the disclosure as much as possible and as clearly as possible about what the district's financial picture is. So to the extent that the county has a different picture than the district does, or what the district assumptions are, I guess, about the impact of this or other agreements, I would really encourage communicating that out really clearly, or where those discrepancies might lie, and kind of where the confidence is it might be coming from the district numbers, or what we're relying on, especially as we move towards budget adoption, and more information will be coming out from the state about what's coming ahead. But I know that I work with partners who are really concerned about the impact of the cuts to the school sites, to the discretionary dollars, and we're really interested in seeing follow through on the resolution of more funding going back to school sites, especially those with highest need who are losing caring adults on their campus. And so just wanting to know what the district's financial picture will be when all of this ends up landing, and wanting that transparency and the ability to engage around that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Hutchinson, I agree with the previous speaker. This is again rough. The teachers voted on this contract almost a month ago. We've heard reports in the media about how FICMAT or the county were not going to approve these numbers in this contract. Then we've also had reports in the media that the district has given your finances over to the county. Here we are almost a month later, you're approving this contract and there's no presentation or anything. The school board and the superintendent were clear that there were trade-offs that were being made, that things were being cut because of this teacher's contract. Where's that information now? Where's that discussion? Where's the discussion about how the May revision from the governor's budget is going to change these things? I mean, literally, we had a 7-day strike, and now with no information, a month later, you're just going to approve this, and then we just go back to business as usual? I don't understand why nobody sees this as a problem. Each one of you made statements about what you thought about the teacher's contract before the strike, leading into it, and afterwards, about what we could afford, where the money is. Where's any of those statements now? Where's a document now? This is our money in our public schools. And it sure seems like you're not taking it very seriously. And you can bob your head up and down as I'm speaking all you want. It's okay, I'm used to working with children. That doesn't faze me. This is entirely unacceptable when we're talking about nearly a $600 million budget every year. So we would like a real statement on who's in charge of our finances now. Who are we going to be able to engage with over the budget? What are the financial implications of this plan? Is it what you said before, or has that changed? You make it really hard for people to trust you or believe in what you're saying when you do business this way.
I guess he doesn't. Yeah. Superintendent Johnson-Trammell.
Thank you. So this agenda item is a vote. That's why there's no presentation. Just to kind of answer some of the questions that have come up in public comment. One, the next update on where we are in our budget is going to be third interim, so that we will be able to see where we are in relation to where we believe we are going to end the year. In terms of who is in charge of the finances, we are still under local control. But when it comes to AB 1200, that is the responsibility of the county to oversee and look at our finances to provide a recommendation. We have always been under a state trustee since we were taken over by the state. So that hasn't changed. I think that part is just more visible now in terms of the role of the trustee and the county, largely with AB 1840. So we're still under local control. We still have a chief financial officer, Ophelia Rojas, who's in the office now. With our partnership with the county, we're doing the due diligence now before the closing of the books, given our long history as a district of having huge surprises after the closing of the books. So we are engaging in a lot of conversations now, working with county financial staff, supporting our team so that we can do our due diligence in terms of our finances. So we're still under local control. A lot of the attention is just because there are folks watching closely to ensure that we're making responsible financial decisions, and that's exactly the role of a trustee. So again, we're just going through the procedures right now of actually approving this particular recommendation. We will continue to provide updates. We're providing a third interim, and we will continue to provide those updates so that people can see where we are financially since second interim.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson-Trammell. And just following up on one of the public comments also, in the past we had posted some of the county letters to the board around after the interim reports on the fiscal transparency tool. Is that something that we can continue doing just in terms of the feedback loop of, public sees board taking action around the interim reports, and it goes to the county, and so there being a consistent place where we're storing that information once the county weighs in?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you very much. Board members, do we have questions for the superintendent or any comments to raise? Director Harris.
Just for the courtesy of my colleagues, I will not be voting on this item for the reasons I stated on March 4th and some of what has come up here today. That's it for you. In the interest of time, that's all I got.
Thank you, Director Harris. Director Gonzalez.
Thank you. Superintendent, so the letter that we got from our state trustee, Chris Learned, was really clear that he believes that we have made the appropriate adjustments to our budget in order to be able to fund this contract specifically. He explicitly said that he was not approving any sort of Me Too contracts, which has been our traditional practice, that whatever raise was given to OEA, because usually we do OEA first and then the other bargaining unit subsequently. And so I'm just curious about and I know, well, anyways, what is your thinking about how we're going to then proceed with the other units that are in bargaining right now or coming up for bargaining right now, given that we only have authorization to move on this contract?
At this time, I can only speak to what we have authorization to. There hasn't been any formal approval of any other contracts, so all I can speak on right now is what we actually have a tentative agreement on, which is what our trustee was doing his due diligence to review.
Okay, so should the community anticipate, in order to settle the other contracts, that we may be making more budget reductions going forward?
We have been since second interim when we were talking about the multi-year projections, and when we're talking about out years, we're not in a position to say that we wouldn't have to make any other budget adjustments for a variety of reasons. If it's talking about increasing compensation, enrollment, increases to special education, or increase of STIRS and PERS. So it's always prudent that we can't make promises that we would never have to make any other budget adjustments.
Thank you.
Other questions by the board or comments? I just wanted to reiterate what I had stated in the beginning, that the board has received letters from both the county superintendent and also our state trustee that they believe, and as we do, that we can afford the current contract in hand, or that we're about to vote on. Director Yee.
Thank you, President Ng. The only question, and this is just an affirmation, I'm sure, but our deadlines were partly driven by statutory requirements, but also by our own obligation to communicate with people with the potential of being laid off, their status. And do we have assurance that all that was taken care of in due time, especially the layoff letters and so forth?
Is your question asking if all obligations have been met by the particular timelines
exactly,
required?
Because the reductions were based
Yes.
upon us meeting our targets for budget staff reductions.
Yes, but the work now is providing, again, given the significant number of layoffs and a lot of the logistical steps that have to be taken to implement those recommendations, that's where there are a lot of hands on deck to support that process, because in the past, that's when we've made errors. So again, part of the work is to provide some of that support up front versus waiting just until the closing in September. But the deadlines have been met.
Great, thank you so much.
Mr. Rickshaw.
And thank you for this to the staff.
Mr. Rickshaw, we're ready for a roll call.
On the roll call, I will be calling regular board members only, because it's a collective bargaining matter, which I think students are not, directors are not permitted to vote on. Director Hinton Hodge.
Yes.
Director Harris.
Abstain.
Director Yee.
Yes.
Director Gonzalez.
Yes.
Vice President London.
Yes.
President Ng.
Yes.
Motion's adopted.
Thank you. We are now on to item T2. Is there a motion to approve the sale of the Oakland Unified School District general obligation bonds?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Hinton Hodge, seconded by Gonzalez. Thank you.
If our Chief Financial Officer can come up to the mic, Ophelia Rojas, please.
Hi, Ms. Rojas. I think it would be helpful. We are on the item on the sale of the general obligation bonds. If you could just provide a high-level summary of what this item is, explanation of this item. We're on item T2.
Good evening, members of the board and the community. The sale of the bond is the last tranche of the Measure J bonds. It's $175 million, and it will fund the projects that has been listed in the ballot measure. We have Helping us on this bond issuance, we have ISOM advisors who will be, who are our financial advisor. Oh, I'm sorry. Makiko is, in place of Makiko, we have, okay, David Stiffel, who is also helping us on our bond underwriter. And we have also Oric, the bond counsel, who will assist us on making sure that we have provided due diligence and complete information in order that we could be in compliance with the federal and securities law. Other than that, we have provided information with the rating agencies. We also are doing a lot of our financial reports that we need to submit for due diligence because our underwriter and our bond counsel will prepare the documents for the sale and issuance of the bond to the market.
Thank you, Ms. Rojas. Is there anything else?
So I think
you'd
I'll
like
give
to
the
add?
floor to our financial advisor.
Great.
Good
Thank
evening.
you.
My name is David Stinfield. I serve as the senior managing underwriter for the upcoming financing from Siebert's Cisneros Shanking Company. The only thing I probably would add to that is that this asking to get the resolution approved is just one component of the entire financing process. We would have to come back to the board for several other approvals before going to market. So this allows the board flexibility to issue the bonds in the instance that the market is favorable, or if there are other changes at the state level with funding, et cetera, that would push the financing forward in terms of timing.
Thank you. Are there any questions by the board to either our Chief Financial Officer or our advisors here? Vice President London?
I don't have any questions. I just want to, remind us how important it is. We know that every time we go out to the bond market, we're able to access about a third of the amount of money that we know is needed to fully maintain our facilities. We just have, like most school districts, particularly older urban school districts, a huge amount of need. So this is something that I believe is really important, and I want to make sure that we have the flexibility that we need when the time is right to go out and access the bond market.
Thank you, Vice President London. Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much for the update, and we'll go to public comment now. Public comment on this item. You could just come forward and introduce yourself if you are here to speak on this item.
I just have one speaker, Mike Hutchinson.
Okay, it does not appear that we have any speakers on this item. Mr. Rakestraw, can we have a roll call, please?
On the motion to adopt the sale of Oakland Unified School District General Obligation Bonds, Series 2019A and 2019B. On the roll call on this procedural matter, Director Hinton Hodge?
Yes.
Director Harris?
Yes.
Director Yee?
Yes.
Director Gonzalez?
Yes.
Vice President London? President Ng?
Yes.
The motion's adopted.
Thank you. We are moving on to item T3. This is an update. It's a non-voting item. Update by our superintendent on the district central office redesign. I'll turn it over to our superintendent, Ms. Superintendent Johnson-Trammell, to take us through this item.
Thank you. So this is just one presentation of a series of three to just keep everyone informed of where we are in our process of central office redesign. So I want to just start off by just acknowledging that we have weathered many storms over the past few months and made difficult decisions, as well as endured a 7-day strike. We have faced numerous hurdles in our journey towards quality, and I am clear that the road that lies ahead of us will not be easy. We must still strengthen our financial house, determine the right relationship for us as a district, to partner and work together between our traditional public schools and our charter public schools. We have many strategic decisions to make in terms of our use of facilities. We need to continue to strengthen the relationship between central office and our school communities and deeply work on increasing the retention of staff. Resolving these complicated and deeply systemic challenges in our district will require grit, creativity, courage, time, and a willingness to examine ourselves in the mirror and make the commitment to do things differently. Albert Einstein once said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. For the sake of our students and families, we must organize differently and recommit ourselves to excellence and keep students and families at the center of all the decisions that we need to make. Moving forward, we cannot embrace business as usual. Instead, we must be more transparent, more nimble, more responsive, and much more effective than what we have shown to date. And as always, changes like this must start at the top. Even though we are living during a time when we have to be realistic about our current constraints and honest about our challenging realities, we still must be vision keepers and maintain an intense focus on what we ultimately want for our students: to be thriving adults who are prepared for college, career, and community by creating quality and sustainable schools in every neighborhood across our city. In light of the creation of Board Policy 6006, Community of Schools, and the citywide implementation plan, and the need to re-examine the quality and types of central office services to school sites and improve systems and processes to improve accountability and central office coherent, and having to make significant central office reductions, we must now reorganize central department structures, redesign central office processes, and central office cross-departmental teams in ways that take into consideration our critical work aligned to our 3 district priorities: quality community schools, fiscal vitality, and organizational resilience, and current financial and staffing constraints, which means now more than ever, we have to prioritize our focused work and efforts more efficiently and creatively. We have been throwing around the term central office redesign for a long time, which means different things to many people. But I want to be clear that central office redesign is much more than just creating a new organizational district chart. Just eliminating departments, merging departments, or changing the names of departments will not address our systemic issues and cure our problems. This process at its core is about unpacking our organizational culture challenges so that we improve how we operate to get more stuff done on behalf of students, families, and school communities. Listed here in this slide, you will find the critical steps included in this process. First, it's important to be clear who we are, what we are about, and what we are driving towards, because that's the starting point of any redesign process. Then define key drivers for changes across central departments that will improve how we operate in service of students, families, and schools. We will discuss these drivers within the presentation this evening. We then must get clear about the relationship between central office and school sites. Given our constraints, which services should be centralized, the same across all schools, and which services can we customize based on individual school needs, as well as the quality of the services and the quantity of services that we'll be able to provide. The organizational charts will be provided by the end of June that is shaped by these decisions. I want to also lift up that we are a district where we have 7 different union partners. So before we change job descriptions, we have to do a process called meet and confer with our unions. So we would be remiss to begin to bring forth different changes before we go through that process as well. So all of these different elements are a part of what we refer to as central office redesign. Lastly, I want to underscore that we haven't just started this process now. Last year, I talked about phase 1 of central office redesign. And coming into this year, we have already eliminated 4 central office departments. We've eliminated the post-secondary readiness office, the district continuous improvement department, the elevation network, and the professional learning department. In all of these eliminations, there has been work that we have had to stop or reorganize. So for the post-secondary readiness office, we had to then merge the work of the high school network office with the work of the counseling services, which was historically held separately. That work is now under one department, which obviously puts more responsibility under fewer people. We've completely eliminated our district continuous improvement, which was a project management unit, and so those project management responsibilities have had to be taken up by existing staff. The elimination of the elevation network means that our current principal supervisors have a larger caseload of principals, which has implications, meaning principals are going to receive slightly less support and coaching from their principal supervisors because there are more principals in schools to supervise. The elimination of the professional learning unit, where there were coaches embedded in our networks, those positions are no longer in existence, and so that's a further decrease of some of the coaching support to our school sites. So I'm bringing those things up because as we're thinking about 1920, these are some of the considerations that teams now are having to think about. With some of the eliminations, there's some work, there's some support and services that we will just no longer be able to provide. And then there are some critical services where we just have to think about how we're going to offer them differently. So again, I'll just quickly go through some of the 4 drivers, which is really about learning, teams, increasing customer service, and creating thriving systems. So really focusing on every central office department, whether we're talking about academics, our school departments, our businesses, and operations unit, really focusing and understanding that their services have a direct connection to ensuring that we have student-centered, culturally responsive learning environments in all of our schools, and being able to draw that line and connection between the service and the outcome that we want in all of our schools. Harnessing the power of teams is really the importance of intently working on building the capacity, whether we're talking about teacher teams at the school site, instructional leadership teams at the school site, and also building the power of teams across our departments as a way to ensure that we have a more stable staff in our central office departments and that we're able to build a stronger skill set across our central office departments as well. Increasing customer service is around focusing more on responsiveness and the quality of our central office services to our school sites. And creating thriving systems is about how we get better at how we're organizing ourselves across departments to have better systems so that when things aren't working the way they need to, we have better processes to not only address the issue at that moment, but to ultimately fix the problem, as well as thinking about our need to continue revenue generation. We're not going to be able to cut our way out of our problem, but thinking about things that we need to do to generate more revenue for ourselves as a district. So again, this just gives you a summary of the theory of action, which is really about if we use these 4 drivers across all of our central office departments as foundational principles to restructure central office departments, redesign central office systems, and enhance central office cross-departmental teams, then we will increase central office efficiency and effectiveness so that schools can preserve more time to focus on creating a quality school environment so that all students are thriving. So just a quick timeline. What we have done so far during the month of April is we begin engaging both teachers. We've been engaging principals. We started to engage communities. We have a lot more meetings scheduled just to get feedback on these drivers to inform our design principles moving forward. In the month of May, we're going to be using that feedback and continuing engagement to be able to solidify what our services are and how to improve the quality and the delivery of those services to our school sites. And then leading up to June, which is where we plan to actually share what will be the organizational chart for the 19-20 school year. So that's kind of the cadence and the sequence of the work. This slide here just gives you a list of some of the engagements that we've had so far. I wasn't able to include in the meeting today some of the feedback from our students because there was an engagement, the first engagement actually during actually today. So this again lists some of the engagements that we have, and we will be continuing those in the month of May. I'll be showing you what those are as well. And we've been intentional to try to talk to different stakeholders in order to get their lived experience around the quality and the services, and using a lot of that information to point to where we need to double down and improve services, where we need to think about where we need different departments to be working together to improve the coherence of the service, and maybe some new services that we're going to need to do in lieu of some other services that aren't as impactful at the school sites. So I just want to highlight some of the trends that we're seeing in terms of what we need to pay intentional focus to as we think about the design of our central office services. So a couple of things that have come up have been, one, alignment, and really thinking about how we need to improve the alignment and coherence. So one example that came up a lot was really the need to think about how the Office of Equity, Community School Student Services, Teaching and Learning, and our principal supervisors, our network departments, how they're working in greater collaboration around the delivery of professional learning. And what has come up a lot is as important as the what of professional learning is, whether it's curriculum or whether it's supporting school culture, that we need to do a better job of really supporting teachers and leaders in terms of how to deliver these services and really keeping the population of our students in mind. Knowing that we have a diverse student population, beginning to infuse, instead of having all of these separate professional learning opportunities, how we're helping our teaching staff and school leaders really understand some of the principles behind culturally responsive teaching and leadership, and that those things need to be more integrated. And so then the implications become how those departments are working together and in more concerts, and what are some of the structural changes so that there's greater alignment and coherence in how some of that professional learning is delivered. There was a lot of conversation around clarity. And in one of their groups, there was the point made that we need to do a better job of making the invisible work of central office more visible, and that typically things are known when things aren't working. But that a lot of times people don't know some of the good things that are going on. And this was especially true talking to some of the teachers. And what it got me thinking about is just some of the impact of us having so many changes over the years. And I'm going back to my original comment around this not just being about structure, because we have had so many different organizational charts over the years. But we have to do a much better job, and it seems like a small thing, but it's a huge deal at the school site to make sure that we're clear on what are the services, and even small things like clear tools around directories where people can actually find the services. And so that seemed to be a huge piece, even in terms of customer service, so that people aren't taking a lot of time to be able to figure out who to contact and know what can I expect in terms of where you can provide me support and where we're not going to necessarily be able to get support. So that was a huge thing that came up. And also overall just professional development. And as the district is needing to fine tune and streamline, in particular for new teachers, what are we saying are the foundational teaching practices? What do we believe all teachers should know how to do? And there was a lot of conversation around, yes, schools should be able to have some level of autonomy, but if there's certain things that we want true across all of our teachers, is that the best use of individual school time to provide that professional development? That there should be more responsibility on the district to get clear around what those foundational practices are, so that schools know that there's a place to go to get training and support around some of those foundational practices. Another piece that was lifted up is improving some of our structures for cross-site learning. So what came up in some of the principal conversations was the need to create more opportunities for some leaders who've been in the job and they've developed some good systems and structures, that they have better opportunities to share some of that learning with their colleagues. So really paying attention to how we can improve some of our structures so that different schools can learn from one another, different leaders can learn from one another, and then also be able to get clear on some of these foundational practices so that all schools know what to expect in terms of being able to support some of their new teachers. Lastly, what was lifted up is something that we actually had in our district probably 4 or 5 superintendents ago, which was a rater system. And this speaks to one of the trends that came up, which was around accountability and two-way feedback. And so what the rater system was many years ago was it was a system where each department not only provided clarity around the services, but also defined what the quality was of that service. And there was a regular opportunity for school sites to be able to provide survey feedback. So not only things that weren't working could be pointed out, but there could be celebratory feedback around the places where things were working. So that was lifted up in many of the conversations around, let's kind of go back to some of the things that we had in place at one time that were working, that we believe will help improve communication, and that we will believe will help to improve the accountability of some of the quality of the services. So what we're planning to do now in the second stage of some of this feedback is to use some of this information to be able to come back to the community around what some of these quality services will be looking like in the 1920 school year, again, given some of the tough decisions that we have to make. I want to give just a couple of concrete examples of some of the work that's already underway. And so one, just kind of bringing back the earlier discussion around the county, there's already, last year we talked a lot about the need to automate our processing and how our paper processes actually drive the need to have more staffing than we need. And it also drives the need for, or actually gets in the way of the quality that we want in our services. And so with the implementation of the escape system, part of where the county is providing support to the finance team who's in the audience, who's been working extremely hard on this piece, is redesigning some of our systems and processes to align to the escape system in order to automate those processes. So again, that's some of the work that's already underway. I also want to lift up some of the work that our CAO was talking about before. Part of our reason for bringing together our state and federal unit and our LCAP unit is because when we actually report out our LCAP to the community, there was a lot of feedback from the PSAC for us not to just show the supplemental and concentration resources, but to show also how we are supporting some of our student programs at the school sites and central from both the categorical programs as well, our state funds and our federal funds. So being able to have both of those units together and being able to have both the compliance work kind of merged with some of the strategic support to school sites to better understand how would I fund a reading program at my school? how would I fund mental health at my school? Then school sites can not only get the guidance around how to make sure they're using the money in a way that's not compliant, but also to be able to get guidance on the best way to use these funds so that we're not having to give money back and we have less carryover. So these are some of the conversations that are already underway, and we're looking forward to bringing you more information as we come back in May for another update. Lastly, here are just some of the stakeholder meetings. We will be coming back to you in May, giving you more information about where we are in terms of our quality services. And we will be sharing the actual org charts in June at the last board meeting. In between, you will see just some of the other stakeholder meetings that are taking place as well as just the conversations that are happening in the central office departments. I just want to be clear, particularly with our finance department, and by finance I mean both budget, accounting, accounts payable, procurement, and payroll. That is an area where we are getting a lot of outside support from the county, and it's more around what we've had in our fiscal vitality plan and what has been in the FITMAT report, how we're improving and making sure that our structures follow kind of standard practices of operating. And so there is some support within our redesign of that particular department so that we can improve, again, efficiency and effectiveness. And that is it for the presentation at this time. Open for discussion and questions.
Thank you. Questions by the board? You want to start at the end and go through, or do you want? Okay, Director Harris.
Okay, thank you for the report. I like where you're headed. I like that you're using community feedback to kind of put together the plan. The one thing, so it may seem like it's not related, but I'm wondering when the first read of the LCAP and budget is going to be. It is related. And so it is directly related. And so since these changes will be implemented in 1920, I'm wondering if, and I think I've wondered this every year I've been on the board, if the first reading, in fact, could be at the first meeting in June, so that we can look at, and then I was going to ask if, in fact, the timeline for the presentation of the org chart could be moved up to the first meeting in June. Because if we don't look at those two documents together, it's gonna force a kind of incongruent discussion and decision at the end of June, and we won't really have an opportunity to cure anything before we get back and you're gonna be in action in August. And so my first is a concern about how does this align with LCAP? When can that draft be ready? And I know we're pressed for time, but I just wondered if you had feedback on those, and I did have a couple other questions. Mm-hmm.
So I can look into us being able to provide some draft schematics earlier than the last board meeting in June. I'm just getting a text so I can make sure that I can say the right date. So the public hearing, the LCAP and budget study session is actually going to be in May 29th, just so that there's going to be feedback. And then the public hearing June 12th, and then the final adoption of the board for June 26th. So given those dates, we can think about, I definitely know that we can provide some schematic in early June, but there probably will still be some changes between that time and June 26th.
Yeah, and I think that's totally appropriate. Just, time to preview it and discuss it and sync it up with the budget. I don't know what the radar system is, but I saw a lot of previous board members kind of giving the thumbs up, saying this is cool. So I'd love to hear if others had questions about that or comments. My other question is, how does this work meet the QSD policy's call for a defined autonomy structure?
So part of the community engagement is, so kind of let me go back to this slide. I think this will be a good way to explain it. as we think about who we are, what we're trying to accomplish, and we're going into this redesign, we've had conversations in some of our central retreats around what is our district archetype, and really being clear that there is no right way or wrong way to organize a district. So I brought up districts like Long Beach and Sanger Unified, where everything is centralized. And so their theory of action is we define for schools, this is what you need to do. We provide the services, and everyone does the same thing. And they get results, and that's how they're organized. On the opposite side, there's kind of like a diverse provider model where all you do is you just provide the outcomes and you give your schools everything and they decide everything. And what I've been communicating is we're somewhere in the middle because organically there are many autonomies that are kind of built into our system, whether it's the small schools movement and just kind of remnants. And I'm just saying remnants because part of our work is we need to kind of have clearer criteria, as well as some of our specialized programs, like our dual language programs, where we just aren't able to provide all those supports centrally. So there are a lot of informal autonomies for those programs to actually thrive. So some of our work now is getting clear, where does it make sense for us to have autonomies? And that actually, from the county side, is where there's been some critical feedback around, you are a district and one of your greatest assets is economy of scale. You know, so there may be places where it's not prudent for you and it's actually more work for your sites to actually do things individually. So we've been talking about contracts as one example. There's opportunities for us, for schools, to have cheaper services if we actually decrease the number of vendors. Where there are places like professional learning, there are conversations around staffing where it makes more sense for there to be autonomies. So part of the conversation, and I believe there's going to be an update on May 8th, is getting clear on what's the vision around autonomies, the phasing of it, but realizing what we're hearing is there are some places where our schools are saying, no district, we actually want you to actually define for us and provide us some support. So it's a blend of both, and given constraints, just being clear. For some autonomies, you know, are we really financially in a position to centrally be able to support that? Or is it communicating to schools, if you are deciding to do X, the support, you may have to do that more on your own because we know we're going to have less people and less resources centrally. So I believe many of those ideas and some of the tensions that we're wrestling with are going to be a part of the discussion on May 8th.
Director Yee.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. It's very inspiring, and it really underscores for me, your belief in teamness and your confidence in the ability of the people who are here to exercise their professional skills to arrive at successful outcomes. So I really get that from the presentation. I appreciate it. The couple of things that I'm interested in is you have these 4 drivers, and so the question I have is, you know, we're going through a lot of if I look back upon the last 2 or 3 months, you know, where we've gone through a lot of anguish, let's say pain. If we would have had these 4 drivers in the front of our decision making, I'm thinking back. I'm just playing it as a reflective exercise. Would we have made better decisions if we got everybody in the room to agree to the 4 drivers? Would we have come out with better outcomes and better time with less money and so forth? And so that's the kind of way that I'm approaching the work that you're doing about the redesign. These are very, to me, aspirational, but you believe in them, and I'm glad we have a superintendent that believes in them. But will they actually lead to good decisions around the budget we adopt, the facilities decisions we make, the closure decisions we might have to make, the relationship between charters and districts, all the kind of decisions that are the pain points for us. Is this the set of tools that we can use as ways to guide the decision-making we're going to make? And if it is, how do we operationalize it as a board? You know, maybe we adopt these, or maybe we adopt 4 other drivers. I have no idea, but these are as good as any. If we actually adopted these, would we be able to make better policy, better accountability as a board? That's what's kind of going through my head right now, because if we don't, and we approach it with a different set of drivers, and the drivers might be charters or cheapness or selling schools or something, you know, if we have concrete drivers like that and not consistent drivers to yours, then we're operating disconnected to you. So that's really a challenge for me, for us as a board. And my last thing is, you know, you raised this thing about the accountability, this discussion, and I'm glad it's a discussion, but I'm hoping in May you'll come back with a recommendation to us and say, this is how, based upon these 4 key drivers, this is how I see accountability. And this is how I'd like you, as a board, to approach accountability in the next year. And we can then get behind that and say, yes, we agree that this is what we mean by accountability, and we can follow your decisions on this. It's no longer the question of accountability. It's not the question of citywide school partnerships. It's you're telling us this is what you've found, and you put it out there for us to evaluate and discuss. We can do that in May, and then maybe we can come to some conclusion in June when we have our own retreat.
Thank you, Director Yee. Director Henhodge, do you have questions?
Yes. Thanks for the presentation. I think the things that, like, speaking to this culture change, I mean, one of the things that came up for me was in talking about the example of a teacher or principal talking, you know, like, where do they go into the system to get their needs met, and how efficient we are, the customer service piece. And for me, that extends right out to parents quite often, where I think that they tend, again, not to always know where to get answers. And so just feeling like if it's a healthier system inside with the educators, it will be healthier for parents ultimately as well. But just really acknowledging, like, we have a very transactional system right now. It just is. If there is a parent that has the capacity to find my number, send me an email, she typically is more likely to get a response to the special ed department. Or an employee is worried about their paycheck and not getting paid on time. If I'm the one of the 20 people that answers the email, there's a likelihood that there may be a response to the issue. So just being really, I know you're conscious of that, and so, but I'm sure what comes with that is the moment when someone can't get what they want because they just walked up and said, so-and-so is the one who always gives that to me. When that changes, what kind of friction happens, right, inside of our system, to just be aware of that. I'm definitely going to be very, when you talk about structures and you talk about foundational practices, you know, my opposite says, or my definition is that those are often like institutional, you know, barriers. There's often institutional racism. It's often some bias that's happening inside of our system by the people that work in the system. And so for me, I continually want us to, like, really be real when we talk about cultural linguistic responsiveness, which is really a different thing. That's really much more academic. But when we talk about equity, you know, this equity office and figuring out how that's going to be across our system. And for me, because we don't define race, and that always becomes a struggle for me, because I feel like if we don't identify, like, the whiteness in the system or white supremacy in the system, that is going to be difficult for us to really move, right? When we don't just name that African-American children have not been served for generations inside of this system, like, I don't care about any of these drivers until someone says, this is a driver that's going to actually mean the difference for a child learning how to read, right? So I'm excited and curious as to, as you know, as your team, you do this cross-team approach of thinking about, you know, serving students better, especially those that are least connected, and those families that are least connected. So more to obviously learn from this process. Thank you for the work.
Director Gonzalez.
Thank you, Superintendent. So I want to go back to what Director Yee said a little bit, because for me, so I think this is good work and it's the right work. But I don't want to see you and your staff go off and create a whole new theory of action, because I think we have a board policy that really says it all. And so that's Board Policy 3150, which says that we as a district believe in maximizing resources to sites. So by necessity, that's going to require doing some of the things that you're talking about around making sure there's coherence, around making sure that we have an appropriate number of central staff relative to the size of our enrollment. So I'm not clear on why we would sort of, to my mind, sort of reinvent the wheel when we already have, and I think the QSD policy also has some of this. So I don't see enough of a strong enough connection between Board Policy 3150 and what I'm seeing here. So I would like to see a little bit more alignment between what we already have a theory of action as far as I'm concerned as a district, and so I want to make sure that that's reflected in the work that you are going to go and have your staff do. I don't see engagement with the board on that list of people who are being engaged, and so I hope that's happening. So that's my ask. Where is the engagement with the board? And then I wanted to suggest something to add to this, which would be to create one-pagers for central departments. So our school sites have to be transparent about how much money they have and how many staff they have and how, you know, what are the goals that they've identified. But our central departments don't have to do that. They don't have to have that same level of transparency. And so I think that would be an important way to get at some of the things that some of the things principals have asked. If you look at the appendix, for people who didn't look at the appendix, principals have asked for more transparency about what central departments are doing. And I think that would be one way to achieve that, is to just publish a one-pager for each central site, each central department. And then finally, last time we talked about the reorg, you said that you did not believe that there would be more reductions in staffing in central. And I've also seen you talk about benchmarking against other districts of our size and what their central office looks like, and that we're not in alignment, right? That we have more staff than other districts of our size, and so there's some reasons for that, right? We know that other districts don't have the community schools model that we have, but I still want to push you to continue to look at, do we have the right number of central staff relative to other districts of our size, and to think about whether we're able to pursue our 3150 goal of maximizing resources to sites when we still are spending more than other districts are spending on our central office. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President London.
Thanks. This is exciting, and I do have a few questions and comments. One of my questions is, it's great that you're doing the outreach that you are, but there's a lot of people who aren't here who might have opinions about how the central office operates. So I think it would be great if you could start to, and maybe this is in the plans already, but be able to provide more of this information online and have a suggestion box where people can write in, because I think someone said this, or maybe we all said this, but to the point of the community wanting to be able to understand. And I'm envisioning you could perhaps even post the video of the presentation you just gave, or a more concise video of someone explaining it, and what it would look like, and then people could view that. Maybe it would be shorter, maybe it would just be 3 minutes, and then they could say, and here's some feedback, and just find some ways to get additional input from folks out there. I personally am all in favor of more centralization. I think there's a lot that we could do to really realize economies of scale, and I do want to see I really agreed with what you were saying there about if there's certain things we want everyone to do in a classroom, then we need to provide that centrally. And we need to own what some of those costs are. I see this in my own job where departments are asked to do things, but they're not given the budget for it. And then and then I believe that should become a central office, you know, or in my case, something different. But the central entity should be helping the sites fund that. And I really, really like the emphasis on customer service, because I think to the point about the trust issues that we have with the community. So if parents knew that if they had a question, they could contact someone either at the child's school or in the central office who would get back to them timely. You know, I sometimes call people and they say, I'll return your call within 24 hours. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But I don't know. And I think the Radar system actually had some elements of that to it. It was just on its way out as I joined the board. But I remember people being very excited about, are we providing you with good customer service? And I'm not saying that we have to send everybody a survey with a smiley face every time they interact with us, but I do think that having more of that kind of interaction would be really helpful. And also figuring out how to streamline our website so that it's easier to navigate. A lot of times the information that I'm providing to someone is just, oh, here's how you find all the LiveGo data, because it's buried. You have to know that you go into our website and then you click on offices or departments and then you click on research, assessment, and data. So we got to find a way to make that simpler. There's a lot of great information in our website that I think could help people with customer service, but they can't find it because it's not easy to access. So thank you for the work, and I look forward to the next steps.
Great. So I just have a few comments to add, actually just echoing much of what my colleague said. Just wanted to echo the emphasis on customer service and making it easier to navigate and tools that are able to do that. And then to Director Gonzalez's first point, for me, one of the questions that was coming up was the tie-in about, I think this body of work is great, but also the tie-in to our current policy, our quality school development, policy, school governance, results-based budgeting, our theory of action as a district, all of which speaks to continuous improvement as a district, working with shared decision-making, power of teams. I mean, a lot of it is spoken here, but really using that to make a more coherence across our district, and really talking about how, you know, if we believe that change and transformation happens at school sites, what is the role of central office in promoting, you know, shared governance at school sites, in the continuous improvement. And I do think that 3150 does talk about continuous improvement at school sites and at central office, and I think it speaks to the point around central office departments setting goals and building towards those goals. So it sounds similar to, I don't know if the radar system or some of the transparency around of what central office departments are doing. But I think a lot of that is embedded in some of our current policies, so it would be good to just draw that out a bit more, because when Director Harris is talking about defined autonomy and quality school development and results-based budgeting, a lot of it, there is elements of it throughout the presentation, but we can, it will help us speak with more coherence throughout use the same language throughout, which I think would be helpful. And I think those were most of my comments. So we look forward to the additional updates and the additional continuing of this work. It looks like our next update will be in a month in May. And we'll now go to public comment on this item.
There are none, Madam President.
Go ahead. Just introduce yourself for the record, please.
Hello, Angelica Honko with Public Advocates. I'm also an Oakland parent. It was good to see this update, because I think I work with a lot of partners who've been wondering about the redesign and kind of what are the entry points to be able to engage with it, and also how will that redesign end up being in service of schools. So I guess to Director Eng's last comment, I was having a hard time seeing, and maybe because it's the central office theory of action, and is that different than the district's theory of action, or how does it overlay? I was having a hard time understanding how these pieces fit with our other language around, change and transformation happens at the school site, and we understand that those most impacted need to be involved in that decision making, so that, you know, maybe a lot of it sits within numbers 1 and 2 around when we're talking about school teams. You know, I heard the superintendent say, like, instructional, you know, strong school instructional teams, but I think there's also a lot there around the work that has been happening around school site councils, and how do we actually make those really robust places of shared learning where you're building relationship of students, families, educators, staff, principals. So I think I'm still kind of digesting. One of the things I was getting feedback also from Justine from CFJ, an organizer there, in terms of the engagement so far, just really wanting to think about how are we making sure we're impacting those students students and populations who haven't been served very well. Students receiving special education services, or you know, the ones that were being tagged for differentiated assistances, and also those school communities that have felt very overlooked. And it's hard to tell from what's being reported when we talk about focus group with teachers or the students from all city council or these living room chats. Are we reaching those pockets and those folks who we most need to change the experience for? For example, even with students, even though we have a really great and robust all-city council, we know that all-city council is not representative of some of the students who are having the most difficulty, I guess, navigating the system. That was one of the feedback, especially from Justine Santos, the organizer with CFJ. And I understand it's great to have had feedback from all the principals, but I know that we've heard, and you know, this real experience, that teachers have really strong opinions about the role that they want to play in their sites, how they can provide leadership and be informing innovation too. So I'm just not sure with the focus group, like who are we reaching in those different spaces? And as a community partner, I now understand that maybe I was invited to the April 17, but I just checked with a couple other folks who were also invited, and none of us saw that invitation, so I'm not sure what the system was that was being used, and I see there will be more, but so just really thinking about that representation, and then I'm echoing how this aligns with the LCAP and the SIPSA. So thanks for giving me more time. There's a lot to digest here, just really a lot good work, I think, going on, but just really wanting to make sure that if the redesign is happening, it's, you know, for whom and how is it being informed. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. So at this time, we are done with new business. Is there a motion to adopt the pupil consent discipline
Move
report?
adoption.
Moved by Director Gonzalez and seconded by Vice President London. We have reached regular board member reports. Oh, sorry.
To vote on that.
We got to vote on that. I just got so eager to
be out of here before 9.
Be out of
Don't
here
get your hopes up.
in a reasonable hour. Let's see here. Mr. Rakeshaw, can we have a roll call for item
On
B?
the motion to adopt the pupil discipline consent report, Director Hinton Hodge,
Yes.
Director Harris, Director Yee, Director Gonzalez.
Yes.
Vice President London.
Yes.
President Ng.
Yes.
The pupil discipline consent report is adopted.
Thank you. What I was going to say is that we have actually reached regular board members' report at a more reasonable hour. So at this time, if any board members want an opportunity to have a report, why don't you please discuss now, Vice President London.
I just want to highlight this Saturday is a big moment for a lot of the people in my community. It's the 11th annual Ride for a Reason. Nearly 300 people will be getting on their bicycles and riding to Sacramento to highlight the need for full and fair funding for public education. I encourage you to look it up. They're going to raise close to probably $150,000 that will be distributed equally to 10 schools in our district. And it's a tremendous, tremendous opportunity. So if you want to sponsor a rider, you can still go online and sponsor a rider at Ride for a Reason. That is what I'm going to report on today, but I'm also working on a deal with a local bookseller where the bookseller will hopefully allow our teachers to post wish lists online, and parents can go in and buy end-of-year gifts for their teachers in the form of books. And there's a lot happening with the end-of-year stuff, so thank you everyone, particularly the parents who are making that possible for our students with the end-of-year activities coming up.
Thank you. Vice President London. Anybody else? Director Gonzalez.
Thanks, President Ng. Director London and I had the opportunity to do some community engagement around future school changes and how we should do that differently going forward. It was really helpful for me. I believe in that was with District 6 parents and residents. And I believe we're going to continue to explore with our superintendent whether that's something we can bring district-wide to future school changes so that hopefully we can have a really different experience for our school communities going forward. And what else? Yeah, so I'm looking forward, hopefully, to be sharing more about that with the community soon.
Thank you. Any other board member reports?
Do you have one? So tentatively on May 17th will be one of the first of many conversations that's being convened by the directive that we gave ourselves around doing an awareness campaign around unsheltered youth and looking at the feasibility of us doing housing as a school district. And so there's going to be these conversations and dialogues that are going to be across professionalism, cross areas, and the tentative date right now is May 16th. So there'll be a lot more to be announced on that. And this also should, support and run in parallel with when we finally get the 7-Eleven work rolling in some kind of way. So look out for more information on that.
Thank you. Any other reports? Is there any introduction of new legislative matter? Does not look like it. This meeting is now adjourned.
Good night, everybody.